So, thank you all for coming, or really I should say, I'm sorry that you felt compelled to take this class. This is Help, Everyone Hates Our IT Department and How to Fix It. So, what's your biggest problem in your IT department as far as dealing with your customer, love or hate from your customers? What are the biggest problems that you'd like to see fixed during this class?
Communication.
Communication with customers, okay. Yes?
Well, it's not just with customers, maybe with the other groups, the Windows team, the Unix team, the network team.
Okay, so you have a lot of different technical groups and communication between them. Good. And when I say customers, by the way, a lot of people say users. I say customers because I believe that these are not consumers of something I'm producing. I'm producing it because they exist. So I feel a better relationship is developed if we think of ourselves as service providers and customers or business partners. And so I won't get into a big debate about it, but if you're uncomfortable with that, just every time I say customer, know that I mean users. Yes.
I'm here to try to figure out how to help the perception, especially in my situation where I am the IT department, thinking that, well, if you're just sitting in your office and I never see you, what are you doing? Are you really doing anything?
So
people's perception.
The perception problem. So if this is what I call the system administration visibility paradox. That if you're invisible, if everything's running smoothly, you're working like a dog, but everyone thinks, well, the system's always up. It must just stay up on its own. And you cut their budget because obviously there aren't any problems. Yeah, so that's the paradox. Okay, so we'll talk about that. Yes?
Do you have pointers for dealing with non-technical people? More sort of in desktop support, which is a small part of my job.
Dealing with the non-technical people that are just typical desktop support users. We'll talk some about that. Yeah.
And particularly like keying in on what he said, it seems to me that it's really the I guess you'd call it the malpractice phenomenon, right? Where someone went out and looked and saw that what has an influence on whether or not physicians get sued for malpractice is not actually whether or not they screw up, but how much time they spend with the patients.
Right.
And if there's all kinds of documented cases, enough that it's not just anecdotes, but actually to the point of data, where people meet with their lawyers to have to start up a lawsuit, and the lawyer says, okay, you should sue this doctor, he's the one who screwed up. And they say, yes, but he spent time with me, I liked him, I want to sue this other doctor.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And it's an instance where the data doesn't follow the logic. And in fact, there's a lot to be said for that. And actually, tonight's keynote speaker, one of his other great talks he gave once was about system administration comparing to the medical field. Okay, so I think I've gathered a bunch of yes.
I'm in a university, and a lot of our users are in the Department of Computer Science.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the big problems is that, basically they don't have to use the systems we provide. They can just use their own laptops or things like that.
Right.
And how to actually make it apparent to them that it's worth using our services, our equipment that is just being maintained for them, rather than them maintaining and patching their own systems.
Right. So they could run things themselves, and there might be a perception that that's cheaper or better for some reason, but it's certainly better for you if they stick with the standards and get their patches on time and stuff.
Exactly.
So
and it's even better. It's conceivably better for them because they're there to. People in computer science are there to be doing research or getting their PhDs or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there to be learning how to be, one-off sysadmins.
Right. Okay. That's a good point. If they're spending 20% of their time futzing with their machine because they're doing the homegrown version, that's 20% of time that they aren't working on their PhD.
Right.
So it actually benefits them. Well, so you just wrote the selling.
Well,
case yourself. So here's something that I learned in.
But how do you make them believe that?
How do you make them believe
Yeah, there are a
that?
lot of people who are really holding on to it. They identify with that. They say, well, I know how to even though that's not what the people are working on or they're hired to do, because you see a lot on the side. But a scientist is also a programmer or a system on the sysadmin. Well, he may spend doing that, he's not working on the science.
So if you've something to notice about liquor stores is they always have a really expensive bottle of something that no one ever buys, and it's there and it's probably gathering dust if they don't dust it. But its sole purpose there is to make everything else look less expensive. Because you're like, oh, your $50 bottle of whiskey, it's sitting next to this $100 bottle of whiskey. Well, that $50 one must be awesome. Of course, when you get home, it's still a $50 bottle. It's when you would have been happy with the $25 bottle. Maybe your group should offer the standard service and the Cadillac service, and then and then the super Cadillac service. So no department will ever buy the super Cadillac service because they'll just assume that yeah, like you had extra money in your budget or something, but they'll all feel guilted into buying the Cadillac service because it's so much better than that crappy standard service. Just a thought, maybe how you see it. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent. Yes?
This probably isn't relevant to the top of the talk. Whenever anyone talks about that, the Cadillac versus the whatever, as it to steer people into something, I think back to what Adam Moskowitz and others have said, don't try and price yourself out of a job. I mean, as long as it's something feasible, but I would be afraid if I'm offering, the super gold-plated platinum service, that someday someone's going to get a big grant and come in and say, super gold-plated platinum, please, and I'm going to say, uh-oh, I actually have to offer this now? Or do it?
Well, but it doesn't have to be. It could be, the slightly better video card and,
Well, look at this conference too. How many things on the website say, look, there's no discount. Okay, there's an early bird discount. There's no discount. It's $250. Come on, $249, right? If people want that, they want to be able to say, okay, it's $300. But if you know the name of this conference, it's not $250. Like everybody wants that discount.
Next year, the registration fee is going to be $10,000, but we're going to have a couple discounts that get you the price that you want.
If you actually show up, your registration only costs $250.
If your name has a vowel in it, you have a discount. Because everyone wanted some kind of the discount was built in. That was the mistake. We should have said we should have priced it at $500, but had these various discounts to bring it down to the price. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about conference politics or stuff. Though, if you're interested in helping plan next, we should talk. And if you're interested in a clicker that works,
I can block the doors on if you need me.
okay. So this guy falls into a hole so deep he couldn't possibly get out. And he's yelling, help me, help me, help me. And finally someone comes over and sees that he's in trouble. He says, help me. He goes, okay. And this guy, the new guy, jumps into the hole with him. The guy in the hole says, you idiot. Now we're both stuck. This is useless. And why did you do that? And he says, see, before you had a big problem, but now we have a problem we can work on together. It's so much better to not be alone when you're working on big problems. And that's what this conference is all about. That's what this workshop is certainly about. We all have problems, but it's going to be so much better to work on them when we're not alone. So what are we going to talk about in this class? This is a mixture of technical and non-technical solutions. The first part, we're going to talk about infrastructure that is missing. So I do a little bit of consulting, and I certainly visit a lot of data centers, and people often say, they describe the problems that they're having, and so many times I see the same things over and over again. So I think that there's a certain minimum set of things that everyone should have, and a lot of small sites just have not been big enough to build those infrastructure things. So putting in that infrastructure is going to save a lot of problems. So what is some of that infrastructure? We're going to talk about some policies that if you have, it's going to save yourself a lot of time and headaches. We can talk about making a good first impression, both technical and non-technical ways, because a good first impression with your users goes a long way. We're going to talk about help desk software, the software that helps you manage your help desk better, and that might be a physical help desk or virtual help desk. Talk about the benefits of starting every host in a known state. Every host starts to deteriorate once it starts getting used. If they all start at the same state, then you at least have a fighting chance. Documentation and monitoring. Well, documentation is hard, and a lot of people don't like doing it. I'm going to talk about some ways to make it easy for you, and so that you get the benefits and not so much of the painful things associated with writing documentation. Monitoring, we're going to talk about monitoring, which is essentially improving your ESP, improving your ability to know what's happening in the network so that you can fix things before a user complains. And in the second part, I'm going to talk about a company that I started working for that was sort of an IT disaster, and the process I went through from the first 72 hours of what I did into various other things that brought me up to speed. It's just sort of a case study. It's a good way to end the day. So if this isn't what you were expecting, it's a good time to change classes. Alternatively, if a majority of you say, Tom, we don't want to do any of this, we just want to do name problems and do troubleshooting like a support group, I'd be totally... So give everyone a second to leave if they're not interested. Also, if you're bored, this is our Wi-Fi network number. You can just, get on, Farmville for the whole 3 hours. Your boss will never know. Just give him the PDF and say, yeah, here's this. Okay, so 3 policies that affect your team's ability to manage their time. How many people were in my time management class in the morning? More than half. Okay, good. This only a slight overlap. It's mostly new information. When I turned the time management class into a half-day class, this is the stuff that's squeezed out. So everyone needs a way to occasionally say go away or no. Like you mentioned earlier, right? And you want your team to be able to say that in a polite way. Well, first of all, you want them to be able to say it. And some teams, they feel they can never say no, and so they're always running on the treadmill. And then you need a polite way for them to be able to say no, and you need a referee way to say no. So we're going to talk about that. So there are three policies empower them to make the right decisions in these areas. And without these policies, customers end up managing your IT team instead of your IT team managing your IT team. So the first policy, how do users get help? If users don't know how to get help, they're going to hover over your sysadmins. They're going to be just lining up at your door, and that's never fun. With a good policy, sysadmins, if people are not using the right channel, sysadmins are empowered to tell them, to correct their users and say, no, I really need you to file a ticket or call the help desk. Okay. So in all these cases, some kind of written policy is best. It doesn't have to be a huge 100-page document. A half-page policy that's readable and concise is better than a long policy that no one reads. So for example, just writing down a bullet. Primarily, most tickets, most problems should be reported by submitting a ticket into our ticket system with an example. You send email to help and it generates one automatically, or you go to this website, click create new issue. Or maybe they are supposed to contact the designated on-call person. Maybe you have a rotation of when people sit, a schedule of when people sit at the help desk. Maybe you have open office hours, or maybe you have all three. So you're supposed to create a ticket, but every Monday from 10 to 11, we hang out in this particular conference room. You can just stop by and chat. It's a very good way of at least of giving the perception that you're open and friendly, and people that are intimidated by your help desk system or don't feel comfortable putting it into words can just drop by and chat. And how do we communicate this to customers? Every way that you can. So these are just some examples. You want to put it on your website, not hidden somewhere on your website, but on the main page for users, maybe in the corner, on the top, a little text box that says, need help, send, click here. It takes them to the ticket system. Big signs on the wall. I was at a company once where we made a sign that said, it was a stop sign and it said, need help, send email to help. And we had a little contest and got people to translate it into different languages. And if we had just sent 1 million emails out saying, please send mail to help, please send mail to help, don't bother us directly, please send mail to help, it would have been annoying. But instead, by having a contest, be the first person to translate this into the language that the first person to translate it into a different language. It was fun, and it got the word out that we really are serious about changing the culture of this company to send email to help. We got something like 30 different languages. It's a pretty cool little contest. And we made a poster for each one, put it up at this whole wall of stuff. Put it in your email signature. A friend of mine is a director of IT at a university, and he has a system that rotates his signature. So it's one of 3 ones. One is reminding people to open tickets instead of calling systems directly. Another one is advertising their open office hours. And another one is advertising training classes. They have very introductory, like how to use email, how to use Microsoft Word kind of classes on a periodic basis. There's a little advertisement for those things. And also, and my favorite technique, I mentioned this morning, is you take the desktop wallpaper for your Windows, the Windows image that you deploy out, and Linux and other things, and you Photoshop it to have the advertisement for your help desk in the corner so that it's always in people's vision. It also makes it look like, the perception to your users is that you've got an in with Bill Gates because their backdrop is, has your ad. People don't understand that when you make an image, a Windows image, and deploy it out, that you put in all this work on device drivers and stuff, and they don't know that kind of thing exists, so they don't even know that you're doing all that work. But because you've changed the wallpaper, oh yeah, then they understand that this is a special customized version of the operating system.
It's more secure.
It's more secure. I used to joke that I'm making my own Linux distro. It looks amazingly just like Red Hat, except the backdrop image has me. It's called Tom Linux. You should try it. Okay, so the first policy is how do users get help, and it helps because it helps users get help, and it helps sysadmins know when to say no. Second policy, scope of support. What do we support? I don't know. Users come to me and they say my home computer's broken. I spent half a day trying to fix it, and then I got in trouble from my boss because I wasn't supposed to do that. I didn't know. I thought I was being friendly. Turns out this is a problem of lack of definition of scope of support. So without writing down your scope of support, eager sysadmins are going to be helpful, maybe spending time on the wrong things, or curmudgeonly sysadmins are going to just tell everyone to go away. I met a sysadmin once who said, I say no to every request the first time it's made because if it was really important, then come back. Oh my God, that's awful. So it's all about giving clear direction, both to your users and to your sysadmins. Yes?
Could you give input at some point on how to get management to help create policies if management is anti-policy? I have
Do you
an
work at
anti.
university?
Yes.
Okay.
How did you guess?
So then you need a non-policy policy. You need a policy that is incredibly simple. That's just like 3 sentences or 2 bullet lists. We do support the following things. You know, computers that we deployed, computers that we didn't deploy but run Windows 2000 and XP or whatever, and then maybe some other things. This particular Linux distribution, and we explicitly do not support, or you don't want to. Maybe it's too negative to say we don't support these, but while we may or may not have supported these in the past, the following items are not supported because they've been deemed obsolete. The support we do give is in helping you upgrade to a supported platform, and that includes Windows 95, machines older than 586s or blah blah blah, and then they might not like policies, but if you phrase it like this, okay, I understand, boss, you don't like policies, but am I allowed to do house calls? Oh, no, you can't go to a user's home. Oh, okay, can we at least write that down? And maybe that's your only policy. What do we support? Anything you could lug into the help desk. We don't do house calls. And then if they're used to that, 3 months later, you could say, we get a lot of Windows 95 boxes. We should really add to the list. Maybe we should take that policy and say, we don't support Windows 95. And so, you start small and add things over time until you get the policy you want.
The house call sounds crazy, but I work at another department at Penn where faculty frequently ask, hey, can you come home and work on my system? And faculty tend to have a lot of sense of entitlement to a lot of things.
Yeah, that's the term. I hear the
is
term
$50
entitlement
an
a
hour,
lot.
yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, I actually ended up doing that for a job.
And he still comes to me regularly and says, do you have students who will come and help me? I will pay them, $30 an hour.
Well, okay, so the
iPhone.
solution for that is to set up a job board. Say, yes, you can do that, but not through me.
Yeah.
You can put an ad in the paper. And maybe the service you provide is,
This
yeah,
specific case is an emeritus faculty member who just sort of comes to me and says, could you help me out and find a student,
Oh,
okay.
if I help you out, you want to pay $30 to install Windows software. So you take
Yeah.
the CD, you put it in. You wait for it to install, and you're done.
And the thing is, I told undergrads don't have any money. You can pay them $10 an hour. He says, no, I have the money. I'm happy to pay them. So
Alternatively, you might. There are some users in that situation where it would be cheaper for you to give them a new PC with the newest operating system. Like
Right.
90% of the support problems might be because they still are running Windows 95 on ancient hardware. Or worst case, it was a Windows 95 box that they've somehow loaded Windows 7, and that's just going to be a disaster if it's that old. So it'd be cheaper for you to just give them a darn new computer, and heaven forbid, include an external hard disk with a 1-button do backup kind of job. Best birthday gift I give my non-technical friends is I show up with, so I don't know a lot about Windows, but I know if I buy a Seagate external USB drive with their you push a button and it backs up thing, and happy birthday, here's your disk, press the button, do the backup, and say, now every week you press this button, okay? And because it's really a gift to yourself, because it means avoiding the problem where they say, oh, my computer died, can you help me recover my data? And you say, no, because I don't have an electron microscope, I really can't do that for you. Really, if we should just shut off the camera, this is, I'm telling too many
I can
stories.
only recover the zeros, not the ones.
Right. Okay, so scope of support gives clear. Now, when I was at Bell Labs, we had a no house calls policy, except certain level of management and above. Actually, what a lot of companies do now is they have their tech support, and then they have executive tech support, which if you've outsourced your desktop support to certain companies, I don't know for sure, but I just imagine the sales meeting where they're like, well, these are all the things we offer, and the executives are like, well, we don't know if we really want this, and then they say, oh, and for a little bit more, we'll give you, your executives will get this special support plan, and for a little bit more, we won't tell your other people that you have this special support plan. And then those people have a whole different SLA, and yeah. Anyway, but actually maybe that's something you want to set up. Maybe you want to set up a couple people that are specifically trained on helping a certain level of management and above, or faculty. Faculty do have certain problems, or emeritus faculty that have special problems. Yeah. Okay, so scope of support. What should that include? It's what, where, and who. What, when, where. Right. So what? What operating systems? What hardware? What applications? When? Is it 9 to 5? Is it 24/7? What about after hours? Can people pay more to get after hours support? Where, do you make house calls? Very critical at a lot of companies. A lot of companies have made the transition from desktops to laptops. They got rid of 100% of their desktops. So no, we will only have laptops, because if it breaks, you will walk that laptop to the help desk, and there's no more desk side support where people walk into the desk side.
Plus you take it home with a VPN.
Right.
A VPN client.
Oh yeah, and that should eliminate the need for house calls, right? Because people can bring their computer in. Though a whole lot of the house calls at one company were because people made these dual boot machines. Well, the support was, yeah, we have the standard company thing, but I partitioned the disk and it's dual boot, and the other boot partition is Windows 95, so my kids can run their games. You can guess what year this is. The house calls were mostly to deal with problems that they created for themselves. Anyway, and who? Are contractors included? Do high-level executives get special treatment, etc.? How many people have either or both of these policies? How to get support and scope of support written down? You do? Are you at what kind of company or organization are you in?
Law firm.
Law firm. Okay. I can imagine law firm policies. This.
It took me 2 years to get them approved.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And it's 100 pages long with references and disclaimers. Awesome.
If you want to put their approval, you just show it.
I tried.
As soon as you get more lawyer involved, there's a difference between.
The best policy is if our field techs take more than 15 minutes, we will just give you a new machine and take back your old one and wipe and reload. And they say, oh, but my data. No, your data is supposed to be on the server. Oh, but I was violating that policy. And that's my problem now.
Been there.
Yeah. Okay. Don't say no, say talk to my boss. Now, you heard me say this a lot this morning, and I'm going to say it a lot this evening, or this afternoon. Management should be spending all of their time doing two things: setting priorities and providing the resources to meet those priorities. And your job should be to do the technical work that meets those priorities. So anytime your boss is doing something as root, they're violating that wall. They're doing your job. And anytime they're telling you how to do your job, they're violating that rules of no, you're supposed to be setting priorities and providing resources, not, I'm the technical person that decides how to meet those priorities. So you get into a friendly debate with a user over, does this fall into the scope? And you can say, well, I think this really doesn't fall into the scope. And they say, well, I think it does, or it doesn't, but you should really make an exception. You say, well, I'd love to continue this debate, but boss prefers to have this debate himself. So could you go to, exceptions are granted by my boss, because he's setting priorities and providing resources. And that gets the person out of the room and lets you focus on technical stuff. Yes?
One trick that works particularly well for people who kind of want something right now and just want to do it is to, instead of saying talk to my boss, in these particular cases, you can say, I'm not sure what our policy is on that, I will have to talk to my boss about that.
Right.
And
That's enough of a
they're kind of like,
threat.
oh no, forget it. I don't want to open up that can. And that way you're not, because if somebody hears talk to my boss, they're just like, well, they might think you're just basically saying no to them all the time. Whereas if you're like, I don't know, I have to talk to my boss, maybe they think you're incompetent on what the policy is. But then they'll complain to your boss, you don't know what the policy is, and so they'll have to write a policy. But they won't get mad at you. They'll be like, okay, I guess they just don't know what the policy is.
That's a really good point. It's much better to say, let me talk to my boss about it than that.
Or even more simply, my boss told me to do this now, so, I'll send him mail about your request.
Oh,
Something
right.
like that.
Yeah, or, I'm in the middle of a really big project that my boss is counting on. I can get to that tomorrow, or you could talk to my boss about reprioritizing.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the things we do at my company is we make people put in a change ticket or whatever for stuff. That slows down the process too.
Yeah.
So that way they can just say, all I can do is just, you gotta put the ticket in, that'll delay it, whatever, so it can be prioritized properly.
It also helps if they don't put enough information in the ticket itself. Like one of the first things I always write back in a ticket is, what's your time frame on this? So you want this machine built, okay? Do you want it like yesterday, or do you want it tomorrow, or in a month, or has it even been ordered yet? And that is another couple hours in and of itself. Where we write back, oh, I saw it half an hour later. I saw it. What's your time frame on this? And they write back and they say, oh, within.
I'm not encouraging you to stall. I'm just saying, if it's within scope, you do your damn job. But if it's outside of scope, yeah, then trying to give you a way to fix it. So at my first job out of college, we had a help desk with infinite scope but limited responsibility. So people could open a ticket that said, the light in my office has gone out. And we wouldn't get upset that, that's not our job, but our responsibility was to act as a referral desk. Thank you for reporting that. Here's the phone number of the facilities person who will get you the letter. Or even be the middleman. We have forwarded this to so-and-so. In the future, please forward it directly yourself. And we did get, light bulb requests, and we didn't mind because we would rather people report things than just sit in their office and fume. Very different than my second job out of college, where if we got something complaining about a light bulb, my boss felt that this person should be taken out to hung out to dry. It's like, what? We should be the referral desk, right? No. They should know what we support. Okay, just a different way of doing things. But I like being the friendly referral desk, especially if you're at a very small organization. People should know. If you're a 10-person company, they should know if it's a light bulb, talk to the office manager. If you're at a 10,000-person company, you're big enough that you should have some help desk that can handle anything, and you have a frontline support that really just classifies the ticket and gets it to the right department. There are companies that you can create a ticket that says, light bulb's out, and the classifier person puts it in the queue for facilities, or I have an HR issue and it goes into a secure queue that only HR people can access, or I need a new PC and it goes into the PC list for people. Okay. So, setting out of scope expectations. Often when you have an IT department that's sort of fallen into chaos, doesn't have a lot of policies, you'll find that a lot of your team members, and maybe yourself, ends up spending half a day on a project that is sort of out of scope, because you were just trying to be nice. When I was at, at Bell Labs, so back when Linux was new and there wasn't great video driver support, I know that problem's been totally fixed, but pretend this was a long time ago. I had one coworker who would disappear for a day, and when he'd come back, we'd be like, where were you? And he'd say, oh, this guy running Linux, and he has this crazy video driver, and I was trying to get it to work, and I just spent the whole day. And Andy's asking, is this me you're describing? No, I used to work with him. And we said, we lost you for a day, that's bad. And so first, well, we did two things. First of all, we found 3 video drivers that not only worked well, but we knew how to debug any problem that they had. And we just told people, we have 3 video cards that we will always support. And anything else, we called it the 30-minute rule. It was really the 60-minute rule. I'll tell you more about that in a second. We would tell people, we will support your crazy screwball video card for 30 minutes. If we can't get it to work, we will pull out of our bag one of our supported video cards, install it, and bill your department for that card. And the reason we did this is, what would happen is that guy would spend the whole day trying to get a card to work. He would fail, and my boss would get a phone call saying, your IT team's a bunch of screw-ups, he spent a whole day and couldn't get this video card working. And the boss would say, well, what video card is that? And it'd be some no-name brand that he had never heard of. Great, so now I'm getting yelled at as I'm being told my staff is incompetent, and they were trying to support something that they shouldn't have been supporting. So I should be yelling at my technician, right? So we solved the problem. We picked 3 video cards we could support, and the technician would say, oh, I don't recognize this video card. I'll give you 30 minutes. If I can't do it in 30 minutes, you'll have to go with the standard. So he'd actually work for 60 minutes, because secretly the rule was actually 60 minutes. After 60 minutes, he'd say, oh, I give up. I'm just going to have to apologize and install this video card. He'd slap it in. Everything would be working in 2 seconds, because as we knew it would. And that same guy who in the past was complaining was now calling our boss saying, hey, your guy couldn't help me. The next sentence should be, what a screw up, right? But instead it was, your guy couldn't help me, but thank God he pulled out a standard card. And by the way, I know he's only supposed to work for half an hour, but he worked for twice as long. I just want to thank you so much. So, I'm sorry, the 30-minute rule, yeah. We publicly called it the 30-minute rule. Anyway, it was a very long-winded version of, he was spending 8 hours and failing, now he was spending 60 minutes and failing. And we were getting compliments. That's awesome. So, just a little technician support. That's really under-promising and over-performing. Okay, so policy number 3, definition of an emergency. Every company has a definition of an emergency. And if you don't, then your users can claim everything's an emergency. So, how many people have a user that no matter what they bring to you, they say, it's an emergency, I need it done right now. Okay, right. Now, you work at a law firm, so you might have actual emergencies. The judge says the legal discovery has to be done by this date. That is a good, But, you have to fix my wife's home computer so my kids can play games, whatever. That's not an emergency. Anyway, written definition of emergency, similar to the scope document. I mentioned earlier, a newspaper, a friend of mine at a newspaper says their written definition of emergency is anything that would prevent tomorrow's edition from not getting on the 4 a.m. trucks. And some other examples here. Okay. And again, when the customer disagrees, have a polite conversation, but then it's escalated to your boss. Okay. So, any questions about these 3 policies? How many people feel that when they get back to work on Monday, they could discuss this with their boss and get a policy like that? Okay. Yeah. And if you Google for sample IT policies, you'll find there's an archive of them. And yeah, just short and simple. Just a bullet list or 2 can be so much better than having no policy.
Another name for these are SLAs, or system level agreements.
Yes.
So, for instance, if something breaks, you have a designated amount of time that they can expect it to be fixed. So for reported problems that are not critical 2 business days. You know, critical problems, 2-hour feedback, that's mine.
Right.
You know, that having those sort of SLAs published on your website really helps. And you can Google SLA and get all kinds of
Okay. Cool. So let's pursue. So follow through. There's nothing more annoying to a user than asking for something and not getting it, and especially because I forgot. That's the worst excuse ever. Computers are better at remembering things than humans, so let's use them. How many people use some kind of request ticket system for tracking your requests? Okay, excellent. I swear, 10 years ago, if I asked that question, most people would not raise their hand. It's really changed IT for the better to have open source systems that have just made it easy to install. What do people use here, whether they're open source or commercial?
RT.
RT? Okay.
Use RT as well, and some other apps.
Yeah.
Some absolutely awful homegrown.
Oh, I use that one too.
Yeah. My first 3 systems were absolutely awful homegrown systems.
The best part about
But they
the
were better
ones
than
now,
what you
though,
had
is that if you have a
before, right?
homegrown one, it's because it's legacy. So not only is it awful and crappy,
Right.
it's legacy because it was built 20,
Right.
13 years ago.
Unfortunately, no. This was built like 4 years ago.
Yeah, and we can't change because the payroll system depends on it. What? Really bad story. Oh.
I'll
No,
tell
but
you a
I-
story. One company, in the 2 years I worked in one company, we went through 4 different ticketing systems.
Oh my god.
We still run 4
Different
ticketing
ticketing
systems.
systems. Because you know what? It wasn't the ticketing system, it was the fact that nobody was actually using it. So like requests would go in. So part of the follow-through isn't actually just having the help desk software, it's using it.
You know, the worst payroll story, someone told me that they saw a payroll system that, to calculate the pay rate for European employees, it did a HTTP request to Yahoo Finance to find out the value of the euro today, and Yahoo changed the HTML that was being returned, so their parser is getting back crap, and it like almost prevented them from being able to do payroll in Europe that month.
Wow. That's what you do.
That's awesome. In a bad way. Okay, so I'll go pretty quickly since everyone says they have help desk already. I'm a big fan of Request Tracker. It's free. It has a good book about it. I don't know why this slide appears that way, but I haven't been able to fix it. And the nice thing about Request Tracker is if you don't have an account, you go and you get a pretty nice default screen that makes sense. If you do have an account, when you log in, you get this dashboard with the tickets that you own, the tickets that you've requested. As you can see here, you can set up different queues. So it's not one help desk, it's 6 help desks. It's a help desk for customer service, engineering, general help desk. At my previous job, I set up a queue for our IT department, and then I set up one for the office manager of our 3 different locations. And the office managers loved it. They'd never seen anything like this. And now people could, like, we're running out of pencils in the New Jersey office. And that was, a ticket, and she could, once a week order from staples.com and just close all those tickets and stuff. And it's open source, and you can install it on just about any version of Linux or Unix. Yes?
I work for a very small company. It's about 25 people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only IT person. When you're talking about, like, I mean, I have to talk to my boss about this. Well, my boss is their boss also.
Right.
So would it be worth the overhead of having a ticketing system even for...
Yes.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I'm in
Because
the same boat as you. Exactly the same. Only God. Yes. Yes.
Let me give you a phrase I use my brain for CPU, not for storage. Right? So to remember things, I don't need my brain to do that. I'm way smarter than that. Right? A piece of paper or a ticketing system can remember for me. It can't think like I can. They can remember for me. So.
Are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet?
No, I think
With him, it's, I looked at the ticket, saw that it's not done yet, and I don't need to bother him.
I think
Yeah.
the thing
Who is
you
the
need
end
to do
user?
is sell it to
If
your
I'm the end user,
management
yeah.
on the fact that you will then have an archive. And they will then be able to say, this guy did 397 different things and can't do X, Y, and Z to his name. He's got data.
Also, yeah, so also on the data front is, so I'm an angry user. I go to your boss and say, this guy, I asked for this thing 6 months ago and it's not done yet. Do you have a ticket number? Well, so in your current situation, he has to believe me. Even though really I've been saying 6 months, but really I only told you 3 weeks ago, right? So now my boss can look at the ticket and say, well, no, sir, you said 3 months, but the ticket's only been here for 3 weeks now. Could you help me? I need you to help me help you. I need you to file those tickets right when you think of it, not, 5.5 months later. So, or you look at the ticket and yeah, it was open 6 months ago and you've screwed up, but at least now you're being punished for real reasons, not for these mythical reasons. And also, your boss can say every Monday, look at the oldest, the 10 oldest tickets and triage them and make sure that they're getting done. So it helps your boss to be visible to what you're doing without annoying anyone. Yeah.
And it's also an analysis of what it is that you do.
That's true.
So
Yeah,
if you find you're being, 1/3 of your services are being sucked up by this one group to the detriment of 3 or 4 other groups, that's something for your management.
You also don't have to sell it to your management, and I found this with monitoring, actually also, that just start using it for yourself, and if somebody emails you something, you just forward the email into a ticketing system, and you can use a lightweight thing, you don't have to set up something that takes a day and a half to do, but then you don't even have to do it. And the first couple of times that your manager says, hey, food said that they asked for something 6 weeks ago, and you're like, according to my notes, those are your emails, like, according to my notes, you can print out the whole page of here's the back and forth that you particularly put in the ticket. There, then your manager's gonna be like, oh, maybe can I start using that?
Right.
I got that with monitoring too, where I wasn't allowed to set up a monitoring system for the company. But I'm in charge of the databases. How would I just set up monitoring for my databases? Well, whatever you do in your department is fine. And then the second that happened, they were like, oh, can we monitor the Apache servers too?
Well, okay.
We don't need to monitor it because we have in-house customer service. So when there's a problem, we get a bunch of calls to customer service, and then they run over to us and say what's going on.
Yeah, painting the fence sure is fun when you like to do it too. There were 2 other examples. Oh, so it could be useful to say if every month you say, maybe you support, sales, production, and development or something, and everything else with executive. So maybe you have 4 groups. If you can say 25% of my tickets are production, and be able to have that statistic produced on the first of the month. For 1 month, it's not so useful. So what? Engineering had twice as many requests. They're engineers, of course, they're going to have more requests. That's, But if you can do this the first of the month, every month, and build it into a graph, you can say, we're pretty stable at executives are 10%, whatever. But I've noticed that on the months where there's a release, a software release, our engineers have twice as many tickets. Now you can say, here's some data. What do you think we should do, boss? And your boss will be saying, oh, maybe you need more help those months. So much better than you saying, I need more help these months, right? And they say, but that's unfair. Your engineering requests take twice as long as the simple things the executives ask for. You can say, fine, on average, all tickets last an average amount of time, but at least you have some kind of count. You don't have to be so detailed as to the exact amount of time. So that's one example. Another example is so a fun thing to do is maybe once a year, figure out who are your biggest, who makes the most requests. So I was at a company once where we found out, we just did a simple RT, from the command line, just output all tickets for the last year, pipe to a simple awk script, and it determined that 3 users were generating 10% of all tickets. So our 3 most active users were 10% of everything. This was a we had 1,000 users at the time. So that's really significant. So we were able to triage all 3, and what we found is one of those people really didn't know how to use computers. And we talked to their manager and got them sent to training, because they were asking some pretty basic questions. Another person was really asking the sysadmins to do his job for them. And that was also a management thing that we were able to solve that. And the third person was constantly pestering us about support for an old version of software, and a version of software we didn't support anymore, but he was still making requests. And we went to his manager and said, what's it going to take to get him to upgrade? And actually what happened was he said, I've seen some users have mice that are wireless. This is when this was a brand new thing. And we said, yeah, if we get you a wireless mouse, will you tell this person that he can't ask for support on this product anymore? And he said, yeah. And my boss took the wireless mouse off his computer, handed it to him, and said, we're never hearing from this guy again. So those 3 top users became very quiet. And really, we helped them more than we helped us, because the person got their training, the person, well, we solved the management problem, which was they were getting other people to do their job, and that third problem, well, the manager got a mouse, so hey. So it's amazing once you have stuff in a ticket system, what statistics you can generate, and how that can help you.
The other thing about the ticketing system that I wanted to mention was, if it was 6 months old and you screwed up, you at least have a record of, well, how far did you get with it,
Yep.
and then where did you drop the ball? And maybe that was when you were out sick with the flu for a week or something. And it's like, oh, okay, so that's where the problem is. That's what you at least can say, well, that's what happened, I'm very sorry about it.
Right, absolutely. And when you go on vacation, you can say, I'm on vacation, Bob's going to take all my old tickets. Or you can, right before you go on vacation, you can say, well, I have these 20 tickets open, and you go over them with your boss. Well, these 10, I've told the user I'm going on vacation, deal, or something like that. These 5, you better find somebody to do it along the way, whatever. And these came from you, boss, so they can obviously. This is just showing some other features. You have most systems let you create additional fields, attach files. Here's a sample ticket, and this tracks all of the history. So the person made a request, someone took ownership of the issue, they added a note, okay, I'm going to call the person back. Lots of good stuff. I saw one person take, so this has a nice API, you can write your own apps that drive this, and I saw someone made a web app where they could configure the PC that they wanted. They could pick among a couple different video cards and stuff, and once they hit submit, it generated a ticket in the new machine request queue. And you could set up these workflows, and their workflow was awesome. It was like, it goes from... Redactive has this built in? Oh, okay, because this was built as an add-on to this. So the workflow was, the person makes the request, and the owner becomes their manager. They click approve, and the owner becomes the purchasing department. They place the order, and the owner becomes the receiving people. They click, we've received this, and it goes to the IT department, and when they've installed it, they click close. So it tracked this whole nice workflow, and they were able to generate statistics about, okay, now that we've done 100 orders this way, the big bottleneck, according to our data, is this phase, and how can we optimize that, et cetera, et cetera.
One of the best things that I found about RT is it can be, instead of the web interface, it can be completely driven by email. Yeah. So instead of log into this web interface, put this data in, you say, send an email to this address, and everything that gets sent to that address gets piped in and automatically creates a ticket. When the ticket gets created, the person that created the ticket gets an email saying the ticket has been created, it's in the queue. When someone opens the ticket, it sends an email. This ticket has been opened. Here's the comments. If you send an attachment on your email, that attachment is put in the system. The entire thing can be email driven.
Yeah, and a user who doesn't know the website exists just thinks that, gee, every time I email the sysadmins, it always comes in the same exact format. and they always seem to know the context of what I was talking about. Yeah, that's because you didn't change the subject line, which has the ticket number edited. Yeah.
I don't want to go too far off track, but I'm looking at today when new help desk system for new sort of machines and stuff. Are there any recommendations or best practices you can suggest for RT?
Best practices for RT?
Yeah, any things like, oh, you should definitely do X or
you should
trigger Y. Stuff you like.
Put it on, you're not going to want, well, my one recommendation is put it on a big honking machine, because this is the machine you're not going to want to have to upgrade much, because people are going to love this so much that you don't want to take it down for a week to move it to new hardware.
Or virtual machine.
The other advice I'd give is put it on the slowest machine you can find, because if your boss didn't approve this, you just put it on some kind of junk hardware, and then when your boss says, I love this, then you could say, well, yeah, but now we need to put it on real hardware. Does anyone else have any best practices you want to recommend?
Having installed it from source twice, I will not do that again. I will use Apple for Red Hat or CentOS or Fedora. I will use, I think Debian has it in their own repository, so you're going to have to add extra repositories, because OMG CPAN.
Yes.
There's a lot of robots.
Yeah.
And that's why, yeah, if it is something where you're doing it kind of like under the radar, I would not recommend RT just because it does take a long time to set up.
Yeah. They also have a consulting company that will do the install for you, and I have friends that were very successful in that.
I'll do it.
You'll do it. And also, it's a way of multiplying yourself. I have 10 things to do this week. I don't need an 11th one. It's multiplying myself if I pay someone else to do it.
So what alternatives to RT are more lightweight?
OTRS.
OTRS, I hear a lot of people recommend OTRS.
Has anyone looked at Roundup for more than 5 minutes?
There was another earlier one called Keystone. I don't know if that's still in the project. That's what I went to, Keystone, so they completing drop. The project wasn't being followed too well.
Oh,
That was it was on. They made a group up on, I guess, when the first one was Yahoo groups.
yeah, Shade. The
Yeah.
author's name is Shade.
Yeah. And it was a great thing because it worked great. It was very easy for me to put it up with. I was using Postgres because I only had that at the time, PostgreSQL. And then I got your book when I went to this. And
yeah, I don't think Shade has really been actively supporting it.
There's things like Mantis too. I mean, there's.
But one thing about this too, you can, if you have your own web server, you can deal with. I mean, what I did, I made a little web form for like these questions that people bug me about. They go on to the site, go onto the form, and drop down this, and this, make it very easy for them. And it'll send it to I use FormMail for that, FormMail.pl,
Right.
and it sends the mail to RT, and it puts in the ticket form. They think that, like you said, they think I'm doing it, and it hands the ticket for what they want. It keeps track of it, and they never have to worry about sending it. Going to the somewhere else.
Yeah, that's good. If you can, that's a good way of hand-holding someone through. Instead of I need a new computer and then getting a reply with, well, would you please answer these 20 questions? Give them a web page with the 20 questions. They click a button.
Yeah, I received 20 texts that are 20 different high schools. I found that one day I had to handle the procurement of all the computers for the administrators. So I mandated my policy. I said I will not order a computer unless it's in RT, because RT has a asset tracker feature. I live by that. You must have the computer in there first. You must then have the reason why it has to be replaced. And if you go to that area, you click on this thing where it says new ticket for this device, it'll put a ticket in, and that's the only way I'll handle the request for a new computer. And they all hopped in line real quick with that.
Yeah.
So then it gave me away from doing inventory real quick. By doing it. So.
Cool. Yes.
I'm sitting in the front row, so I didn't see if anyone else raised their hand saying they didn't use ticket tracking. I would just say to you, sir, and well, and anyone else, you know, there's all of these cool things that Tom's talking about other people can do too. I would use RT if I have a bunch of student employees, but I'm only full-time. But if I was the only person doing tech support, I would use RT only for its ability, only because it's so much better than any other email client and email support. I mean, even if you throw out every other feature that it has, just the ability to have every issue be a separate ticket and deal with that, it's like an email client designed for help desk on steroids. For that alone, I would use it. And I mean, like I said, it's a little bit of work to install from source, but it's I think it's fairly straightforward to set up and get using in a basic configuration.
And like Tom said earlier, it's a way that when that irate user says, this hasn't been answered, because of those 20 high schools I talked about, the presidents of high schools one time, when we went our year 2000 change, they had a meeting, and it was like the villagers looking for the Frankenstein monster, they wanted me. And out of that meeting, I went to Keystone, and I went to this, and when I used Keystone for a year, I showed my boss I handled 1,500 requests. I said, calculate that per day. There's only 200 business days a year. And he just went, okay, never mind. And he told them to leave me alone. But it's the best thing. You go right in there, you get the number of tickets you have, it helps you validate what you're doing. Your boss thinks you're sitting over there, playing Quake all day.
Right. But it's not just Blue Sky. I mean, if you install it, it will start helping you within the week. Without even needing to do boss stuff, graphs, and all of that.
Yeah, and your users will push back. They'll say, no, I want to send an email to you directly, and
they're warm and fuzzy about it. Yeah.
And these have been said already, but I mean, this will be your biggest problem is getting people to use it. So you can forward their email to the system, and then act as if they did it, or you could. But that's not training them to do it. So you need to do that and send an email saying, I forwarded this to the ticket system, please in the future do that yourself. The other thing is, like people were saying, use it as a rogue system, and then other people will start to adopt it once they see success.
I can tell you what I started doing, because I had some initial pushback from the system. I said, I got to do this, because I was losing track of things. Yeah. It's simple enough. I had my own list, but things would get added to it. This made it bulletproof. I said, first of all, you take the softball. You say, look, I really need you to do this because if you don't, I could lose it. This is my system, and it automatically confirms that that's on my list and I can take care of it. They take the hardball route. If it's not on my list, I don't have it. And then it's progressive, and they have to do it, and you need it. You can't go without that kind of a system, without a system like that.
Gives the user a service level guarantee. If you put the ticket into the system, I can guarantee that you will get a response in a certain amount of time. You will get somebody coming through that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. On the other hand, a user hearing that, they're not going to believe that. What they will believe is when you go on vacation, the person covering for me looks at this. That has obvious value to the person, and they will also hear this way. This way they can check the status of things without having to find it. Those are two undeniably valuable things to them. That's benefits to them. The other stuff, SLA sounds a little squishy, not sure if it's really going to happen. But there's other things. One more and then we'll move on.
Remy used to let those requests sit in his personal mailbox for 24 hours.
Yeah.
And then send a response that came from a robot. But he cut and paste this, this system has detected this ticket request in Remy's mailbox. It is being returned to you. You must submit a ticket. Thank you for your cooperation. It was like this robot.
In all caps.
Yeah.
All space.
I found also that you just tend to get to the things that are in the ticketing system and tend to not get to the things that get emailed.
Yep.
People learn.
Yeah. And I tell people, on a busy day, I sit there clicking reload on the help desk system, and I ignore my email box. You want to be on the system that I'm paying attention to.
Yep.
Can RT, when it applies to the user, can it make it look like it's a person, or does it look?
It's ASCII. It'll generate whatever you want. You can change the templates.
If you could do Perl, you're in gold with this thing.
Yeah.
You can do everything inside of it.
But you don't even need to modify Perl. It lets you put in these little, up to 3.8, they called them scripts, S-C-R-I-P. I think they've changed it to be a less ridiculous word than as of 3.8. And it's a very simple language that you can go without even knowing any Perl to modify
Because
what it does.
we have a homegrown system, and the thing is that the users very much feel like they are talking to people, because when I reply to something,
Yeah.
it has my name on it, but with the system's email
yeah.
address.
RT does that.
RT does that, yeah.
And so, and then if the ticket gets transferred, and then somebody else has their name, but again, the same.
Yeah, it's like that. So the last thing I want to say on this subject is don't get sucked into bad software. I see this over and over again. Company has no help desk software, but they have a bug tracking system. And management says, well, why don't you just use the bug tracking system as your help desk system? Oh, no. Bug tracking software looks and smells the same, but it's actually totally different. It is, bug tracking system is about gathering statistics to improve the development process, and help desk software is really a communication tool for communicating with users. So bug tracking takes an hour to open a ticket because you want to make sure you got what versions does this fail under, blah, blah, blah. Help desk software, it's fast to open a ticket, it's a communication mechanism, lots of back and forth. Yeah, totally different. Okay, so next topic, the grand circle of happiness. So this is really focused on desktop support. So if you're supporting a dozen or 1,000 users and their desktop environment, you want to start out right with all new customers. I mentioned making a good first impression before. This is what I'm talking about. Then you want to maintain the relationship. You want to have a structure to handle their problems. You want to handle their problems expertly. And you want to preferably fixing problems before they even notice them, and then repeat. And if you can keep this loop going, you're going to be in good shape. A lot of companies, a lot of organizations fail at just one of these steps, like starting off right with all new customers. When I joined Bell Labs, the new customer experience for the first week sucked. Oh my God. And then they couldn't understand why it was hard to maintain a good relationship. Well, they were starting off on the wrong foot. Some companies start out well, but then don't handle technical support. So anyway, how can we do these things really well? A lot of it is about perception versus visibility. So these are two different things. Perception is how people see you. It's a measure of your quality. And visibility is how you present yourself to them. It's how you are visible to them. It's a measure of quantity. So how visible you are is how much are people seeing you. But your perception is how do people see you. And the point I want to make here is you are responsible for managing your own visibility. Time and time again, I talk to sysadmins who say, hey, if I do a good job, they'll notice, and I shouldn't have to manage my visibility. Amazingly, when I teach this class in Europe, it's always the Germans who are like, no, I'll just do a good job, and if they get good service, if the technical problems get fixed, they'll be happy. Oh, no. It's everything around it that makes people happy. It's like people were saying with the lawsuit, the malpractice lawsuits with doctors. It's not whether or not the patient got cured, it's were they treated well. So let's talk about perception first. Hello. Okay. So are people perceiving you accurately? What is the first impression that you're making? Do your efforts match their expectations? And how do you manage how you are perceived? So, oops, did I go 2 slides? No. Okay. So making a good first impression is what I call the first day of school paradigm. If you were a bad kid on the first day of school, it's going to be difficult for the rest of the year because it's hard to regain a good reputation. But if you're good, if you're super good on the first day of school, and that's the impression you make with your teacher, you can get away with anything. because you've made that good first impression. So it's sort of like a bank account. You've developed some goodwill, and now when you do have a problem, people are going to cut you a break. So, you know, you're running a good system, things are pretty good, you have an outage, and people say, oh yeah, the file server was down, but you know, he does such a good job, it's a shame that that file server crashed. They'll cut you a break. As opposed to if you have a network that's crazy and everything's always down all the time, then something really bad happens. They're going to say, yeah, well, that's the environment we live in, it's just this crappy environment. So it's important to make a good first impression. So there's a couple opportunities that you want to take advantage of. When the person is hired, how many people have a process where, how many people work in places where on a person's first day, they get some kind of orientation session from the IT department? You do, awesome. That's really your best opportunity to make a good first impression. If you don't have some meeting with people on their first day, then how are they going to learn about the IT department? One of their coworkers is going to represent you. And how are they going to represent you? They're going to say, oh yeah, and if you have a problem with your computer, send an email to help and maybe they'll help you. But if you're there, you can say, hi, if you have a problem with your computer, send an email to help. By the way, you know, my name's Tom, nice to meet you. Makes a big difference. I was at one organization where the management didn't want IT department to do this kind of thing, and it was just a bad situation until we changed their mind. Oh, okay, we'll talk about that in the next slide. When you join the organization is another important opportunity to make a good first impression. So when you hire a new sysadmin, does anyone know? Do you send email out to all the users saying, hi, we'd like to welcome this new system administrator, he has a background, or she has a background in Linux or whatever, and they'll be focusing on storage or blah, blah, blah. Especially if you can say some nice things about the person. Recent graduate from impressive university incorporated. And then there's your install base. So how can you make a good first impression on your install base? Well, they're installed. It's hard to make that first impression. But when you return from this conference, especially if they notice that you were out on Friday, you have an opportunity to say, hey, I'm back from this conference and I learned a lot of new stuff. And probably if you try to make changes to your environment right when you get back, people are going to be a little more willing to give you benefit of the doubt on these changes you want to make. Because you just got back from this important conference and maybe you learned something, right? If you try to make changes a month from now, they're going to forget that you've been at a conference, or it won't be as real. So how do we make a good impression on new people? Think about what it's like on a person's first day at a job. It's scary. There's all these new people. I mean, it's hopeful. It's scary in a good way. It's like, oh, I'm excited about my new job, but I'm terrified because I don't know any of these people. They're trying to make a good first impression on you. It's a good opportunity for you to make a good first impression on them. So I think that it also, if you as an IT person makes a good impression on them on their first day, they get a good feeling about the company in general. So for example, if on their first day, their account is set up, their phone works, their PC's set up, everything's wonderful, you say, hey, I started a job at this great company, look how good they are. If it's like, oh, hi, welcome to this company, your PC might arrive next week or the week after, oh, sorry that your phone doesn't work, oh, there's a meeting today, you didn't get the announcement because you're not set up in the email system yet, that sets a bad impression about your whole company. So, okay, so what can you do? I already mentioned a lot of this. Create all new accounts, your network jack configured, PC phone, all your badges set up. What are the required tools to make these kind of things happen? Well, first of all, you have to know that new people are coming. How many people know if a new employee is coming before their first day? Yeah.
Depends what office they're going to work in.
Depends on which office.
Yeah.
When I was at Bell Labs, we were told, I said, we need early warning that people are arriving. Oh, no, we can't possibly do that. Why not? Is it a secret? Did people interview and get hired on that same day? And because I really think that it's like this at least 3-hour process to hire people at this company. So you could give me 3-hour warning, right? So if ideally, someone in HR, once an offer letter goes out, you get a warning, and then when the offer is accepted, you're told, yes, it is accepted. And so you have a couple days notice, hopefully a couple weeks notice, to get their PC set up. And in an ideal situation, when they accept the offer, HR calls them and says, okay, what username do you want? Do you have a preference for Mac or Windows? Yada, yada, yada. And if you can set up a form for the HR person to fill out, then they don't even have to know what the questions mean. They just know how to pronounce the words and write down whatever the person says. Let's see. Alternatively, what if you don't know if people are coming? How can you find out that someone's coming unofficially? Bribery. Yes, this is where bribery comes in. Usually the department secretary knows that someone's coming. So, so I highly recommend bribing the department secretaries so that they will feed you information if your HR department isn't willing to feed you this information. So what's a good bribe for secretaries? Chocolate's sort of good. What else?
Screensavers.
Screensavers, absolutely. In the 90s, if you were the secretary with After Dark 2, when everyone else was on After Dark 1, you were the coolest secretary in the office. Those were, in the 90s, the 3 most important apps you could install to our secretarial pool. After Dark, More After Dark, and After Dark 3. So another thing you could do is you could make a deal. You say, thank you so much for warning me that that person's coming. It let me have their computer set up. Let's do that in the future. Okay. In fact, if you do that in the future, I noticed your PC is a bit old. We're doing a PC refresh. I'm going to make sure you have the nice computer. Or more importantly, they don't have to have the nicest computer. They just have to have one that's nicer than the other secretaries. And that can save you $500 right there. That just paid for this conference. I just saved you $500. Save you even more money. This is a trick I learned at my previous company. Our IT guy in one of the offices said, all the clerical workers have these crappy computers, but it's okay because really they're just doing like basic word processing and spreadsheets. They don't need really nice computers. But if we just changed their keyboard to ones that didn't look like out of the 70s and gave them flat panel monitors instead of the crappy monitors they currently have, to them it's a new computer, but it's only going to cost pennies. And we went to Dell's used computers, a refurb website. So for like nothing, we got them flat panel displays and new keyboards. Oh, they were so happy. So I just saved even more money. Totally in favor of bribes. I think there's nothing unethical about making sure someone who helps you has a really nice keyboard now. Okay, so the first tool is be involved in HR. HR probably has some kind of checklist. You want to be on that checklist. You also want to have your own checklist that for each new user, here's the things that we do. Actually, there's a slide about this later. Contact them for preferences, I mentioned that. Pre-configured machines. If you're hiring at a velocity of 1 or 2 people per month, especially at like small companies that are growing, pre-buy the machines. You can probably get a discount if you buy 4 at a time. Preload the operating system and everything, and now you can just deploy the new machines almost instantly. Have some kind of new customer documentation, 1 sheet of paper. Just 1 sheet that says the URL for our help desk is blah, blah, blah. If you need help, blah, blah, blah. The calendar system we use is this. The email system we use is this. A couple basic details. Just basically when you visit them on the first day, you're probably going to make 2 or 3 points. Have those points on a piece of paper so that at the end of your conversation, you can say, so in summary to what I said, here's a sheet of paper in case I went too fast. You know, on their first day, they're flooded with new information. So if you give it to them verbally and written, at least they have the written version. And you do want to do that customer visit on their first day, and a week later, show up. And I always make the joke, hey, I know on your first day you were flooded with information, so I'm revisiting you so that you can ask the same questions as last time, but now you're not flooded. And usually we have a laugh, and they do ask, they say, yeah, I know I asked this, but I don't remember. What was the answer? And you go through this. So very simple tools for making a very good first impression. Is there a hand up? Just scratching.
Yep.
Okay. So I talked about bribing your secretaries already, selling it on HR. This is a pet peeve of mine. At Bell Labs, HR would have. They were the example of, we can't tell you when people are starting, we can't tell you this, we can't put you on a checklist, we can't do anything. So we made our own checklist, and we put them on. So eventually we called HR and said, oh, you're number 3 on our checklist. So now and that sort of turned the table. And then as soon as we finally got our process really set in stone, then some brilliant person in HR decided that company-wide they needed they called it the soft landing program. People needed a soft landing when they arrived at the company. They basically did what we had just set up. Here's a sample new hire checklist. It's a timeline. 3 weeks before, we try to have certain things done. 2 weeks before, we have certain things done the day before. The accounts are enabled. Secretary verifies, should visit the office and make sure that PC is sitting there and the phone is sitting there, pick up the phone, make sure it works, and if not, alert us. Then on the day of the arrival, the manager helps the person logs in, change their password, and at 2 p.m. they meet with the system administrator. And a week later, that follow-up visit. So a very simple checklist that you can use as your first draft. Some things people typically ask a new user about when you're asking them for their preferences. User login, do they need any special hardware or software? It can be great if you can tell them in that conversation what their email address and new phone number will be. That really impresses people. So it's something simple to do. You just have to do a little legwork to make sure it can happen. And yeah, technical people are usually much more impressed by being able to pick their own user ID. How many people work at a place where your username is some formula that users aren't allowed to pick? Like ID in 7 digits? Not that bad, but like first initial, last name or something?
First name, dot last name.
Who has the worst policy here?
I work in a French bank.
Yeah.
And we have UT code, so it's the letter U, the letter T, and then some random string.
Awesome.
1205
That's what we do as well.
A friend of mine is.
This used to be ST for students and then your mailbox number.
Ah.
So my email address was ST9634335. That was my email address. The best part was that one of my friends was ST96344, and we would sometimes send each other some mail.
So a friend of mine, his company had this great flexible, have any username you want. They just got bought by a major bank, and the first thing that the major bank did is said, we don't like that. We are changing every single account to be letter, 6-digit number, and the 2 letters are the initials of the company. And he looked at it and said, that's not the initials of this company. And they said, oh, well, 15 years ago, that was our company's name. Awesome.
Because when we went through a series of mergers, so our account numbers, in this location, our preference with NN for not Marianne.
Oh, good.
Married Rochelle Bush. Yeah, that's married. So yeah, so it's a company we're not even on.
Yeah. So another pushback that I've seen, people obviously, it's too hard to work across departments, and like I said, just make your own checklist and put them on it. And if they get upset, say, well, then why don't we work together on this checklist?
What do you mean by that? I mean, how make your own checklist. How are you going to find out that a new hire is coming in
Say every time we do find out, we will then activate this checklist.
And you contact HR and say,
you
"Oh,
find
by the
out,
way."
you find out by, well, bribing secretaries.
Right.
Or HR does have to tell you eventually. Maybe it's on the first day.
You might also find managers find out about your system and give you a heads up as well.
Right. Yeah, you can encourage managers to tell you. If HR won't tell you, the hiring manager must tell you.
So then when you put HR on your checklist, what do? Contact HR and say, "Oh, by the way, we found out there's a new person coming and we've done these things," or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Or, we've been told someone is starting, I'm calling you to verify their start date. How did you find this out? That doesn't matter. I need to know what the username's going to be. I have no problem being a little bit persnickety with HR, because I think in this day and age, if HR doesn't grasp the concept that you want people to be productive on the first day and have a PC and stuff, then screw it.
Do you remember our secret weapon?
What was our secret weapon?
Dips against host.
Oh, so Host was our corporate directory system, right? So we would, so we would take a secret snapshot every day and then diff it, and we'd get this report. People added, people deleted, people who have moved, and we'd say, oh, people deleted. Gee, maybe we should delete their accounts. Call their manager and find out if they've really been deleted. And people added, oh, we weren't asked to set up a machine. Maybe we should contact their manager and find out what's up. And then people who have moved, it's like, if they moved within the building, that's okay. But if they moved to another building, then there's work for us. Now, one of the good things about SOX is that SOX is the Sarbanes-Oxley law. If your company is in scope for having to follow the SOX law, one of the things is you have to have, when people leave the company, their accounts have to be deleted or disabled globally in a predictable amount of time. And most auditing firms will say that predictable amount of time has to be less than 2 hours. So that has forced most companies into finally tying their Active Directory and LDAP systems to the payroll system, so that when someone gets fired, it disables their accounts. Which is what we should have been doing all along, but it wasn't happening because of people saying this kind of stuff. So when we fail at doing our job, the government steps in and tells us how to do our job with SOX. Let me get off my soapbox.
Well, the federal government doesn't actually do that themselves.
Right, it's the, actually, the SOX, that part of SOX is like 2 sentences, which the actuarial or the accounting firms have turned into 500 pages of rules, like accounts have to be deleted after 2 hours. So, okay, pre-configured machines. How many people here have can build a new machine in less than a day? Like once you've got the hardware, okay, so either ghosting an image or some automated install process. Who does automated install? And who does like an image, blasting an image? Okay. There are benefits to both. I like having my machines ready to eat. 2 or 3 in the stock room, preloaded. Our CFO always hates having 2 or 3 machines sitting doing nothing, but if you can convince them that you're hiring X many people this quarter, yeah.
We have, of course, lifecycle replacements, and they lifecycle through every 3 years. And a couple of years back, I convinced my boss to buy 1 extra machine with each order to have as a hot spare. So whenever that generation machine has any kind of hardware problem or anything that I can't fix in 15 minutes, I just swap machines and I'm done. And then I can work on that other machine independently. But the critical thing is that it's the same generation. So if there's one user who complains about their system being too slow every month,
right,
and I swap the machine out, they don't keep getting a new machine each year. They get
that year's machine.
They get that year's machine
okay,
until they get upgraded.
That's a really good lifecycle management tip, by the way. If your computers are depreciated over a 3-year life cycle, that means every year 1/3 of your machines should be replaced. And so now, and accountants don't like spend money, but they really hate unpredictable spending. So if you could tell them, well, we have 1,000 machines, we're going to replace a third of them every year. That's a certain number of machines per year or a certain number of machines per quarter, and they like that predictability. And that's a good idea. You buy one extra machine of that year, and so if someone complains that their machine's dead, they get that same one. Does anyone here work at like a research group with a lot of summer interns?
Oh,
Yeah. So we used at Bell Labs, when the interns arrived, everyone would beg us to take all of our spare parts and use them to assemble them into machines for the interns. And what worked, and that never works. So what we said, no, rather than give them the crappiest machines, why don't we give them brand new machines, and when they leave at the end of the summer, those machines become the upgrades for people. And all of a sudden, oh yeah, now there's budget money for machines for the interns. Because it's just that, because in 2 months, that's new machine for the people approving the budget. Okay. Yeah, I've been talking about that a lot. New customer documentation. Yeah, have just a one-sheet thing that you leave behind, and that gives them the URL to some online docs. How to get help, code of contact, standard software, locations of major file
I assume you mean a general code of conduct, not something particular to IT?
Maybe, I guess an AUP, an acceptable use policy.
All right.
Yeah, most companies now have something like that. No running gambling sites on our machines.
Yeah, and actually, most companies do, because now the law says if you don't have an acceptable use policy, the default policy is blah, blah, blah. It's something that companies don't like. So that's really forced them. Oh, are we break time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The secret is you've always had that, because there's always stuff like you're not allowed, there's always some clause of you're not allowed to use company resources for personal use.
True. Okay, have a good break. Enjoy. See you in 25 minutes. So, when we last left off, we were talking about making a good first impression on our users. And one of the techniques is to have your machines pre-configured. Does anyone have a small battery? There we go. Okay. One of the reasons that automated installation systems for desktop PCs is so important is that it starts every host the same. Once you give a machine to a user, entropy sets in. Things get out of place. Software gets installed that does bad things. So if we start every machine with a hand-built, slightly different construction, then we're already starting halfway into bad entropy. But if we start things in a standard configuration, it holds off entropy for at least a little bit. It also makes it easier to support the machines and easier to fix the machines. So the first time I ever was on a team that used a automated installation system, after it was done, actually while we were working on it, I asked the field technicians, just give me an estimate. What percentage of problems, user problems, were really due to configuration errors created by these hand-configured machines? And they said, well, for a user's first month, about half of their tickets were related to various configurations not being the way they should be. I said, great, and after that first month? And they said, oh, well then the number of tickets goes down, but the problems get bigger because, it's a year later they're using Excel for the first time ever, and it's not working. And we spend a day trying to figure it out, and it turns out that a year ago when the machine was installed, it wasn't installed right. And who would think of checking those kind of things because it's a year later? So, big, powerful reasons to have an automated, consistent installation system. So every operating system has some way of automating the installation. Why? Because companies finally realize that our ability to rapidly deploy machines is related to our ability to rapidly buy machines. So I know a lot of companies weren't so interested until they realize that. Okay, so we talked about some of these already. Now, once you deploy an image, how do you keep them all the same and keep them all patched? So there are various systems for keeping all your systems patched and up to date, or just you make a change. Say we're going to change, some registry setting. How do you do that globally? You certainly don't want to walk machine to machine doing those changes. So on Unix platforms, there's CF Engine, and Puppet is becoming very popular. Does anyone use a system like CF Engine or Puppet? Puppet? What else is used? CF Engine? Ooh, a battle brewing. What do you use? Tiebreaker. We walk around and type on keyboards.
We're fighting back and forth. So there's two of us. One is CF Engine, one is Puppet, and the others will just
CF Engine was growing really long in the tooth and hadn't gotten a lot of major updates. And so Puppet was created, and boy, it has all the latest features. It's slow. Well, it's not slow. It's perfectly fast enough for most people. We're using it to manage 10,000 machines, and it's too slow. It doesn't really scale to 10,000, but most people don't have that problem.
There's also BCFG2.
Oh, BCFG2 is also, yeah.
Been hearing about Chef.
LCFG. Chef.
Now, on grid computing, people talk a lot about Chef and is it ROX.
Well, ROX is a whole. I mean, that's not just. It's not a configuration you
Yeah.
can bolt on. It's a whole
It's a
Linux
larger
distribution.
suite.
I mean, really, it's just CentOS with some extra sauce added on top, but it's
Okay.
that's a whole solution. I mean, this is you
It is
install it
one
on.
button deploy for your cluster, so it just spits everything out.
Yeah, that's what you put on your bare metal.
Okay, so ROX is a bare metal to operating system running.
It's a distribution.
It's a distribution. Okay,
That
and
includes a scheduler and remote management utilities, which they take it from elsewhere on the web and that sort of thing.
okay.
Kickstart
Grad student
utilities.
enabler kind of cluster.
Okay. So the way CF Engine and Puppet work is you set up these rules, like this file should have this permission, and there's so it's a bit of code that says a rule like this file should have this permission, and code that says if it's not that permission, here's the command that would fix that. So you load it up with all these rules, and you say web servers have these 50 rules, and desktop machines have these overlapping 70 rules, and mail service have these rules, and you say have at it, and CF Engine or Puppet will run on the machine and bring the machine into conformance with those rules. Then Windows has something that used to be called SMS. It's now called SCCM, which is, people think of it as a way of distributing patches, but you can also distribute commands to run on each machine. So I've seen that used for everything from how to set up printer configurations, all sorts of different stuff. But the point here is that it lets you maintain all your systems be the same or consistent. There was a hand up.
I did have a small off-topic question.
Sure.
You talked about RT. I was wondering if you have a tool you recommend for project management.
Okay, so project management as opposed to ticket management. I don't know of a good project management stuff. Oh wait, isn't the 23? What's that website? 44 folders, 23 llamas, 37. One of those sites. It's a number, a noun.com. has that one, yeah, has a project management tool. It's called Basecamp. Basecamp, yeah. Does anyone?
I think 43 folders makes good.
43 folders. That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
37 signals.
I think
37 signals. Yeah.
there's also one called 43 folders though.
That's a time management blog.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so does anyone have actual experience with a collaborative project management tool?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I've been on basically, people will use spreadsheets. That's your very basic project management tool. Just getting all of the tasks down, getting everybody just to see it all in chronological order. That is the simple, basic one that I
I'm trying to
actually.
get away from, alright, so yesterday I spent 3 hours reading with a table that's twice as long as this, 3 times as wide, covered in paper, and one Gantt chart.
Right.
So
And
I want to get away from that, and something I can email to, and
Are they
But next
using,
thing, yeah,
are
is
they-
also Microsoft Project, which I.
are they using Project to create those Gantt charts?
I believe so.
So there's like Project Server, which runs on the network, and it certainly like works as an enterprise tool for PMs and managers to interface with in terms of checking check lists.
Yeah.
I set up Project Server, Microsoft Project Server. I think the hard part is getting project managers to do it.
So that's the thing, so.
Yeah. So one nice thing about Basecamp is because it's web-based and everyone has access, everyone updates it because they want it updated. You know, the people that care about it can do their updates, and it's on the web, so everyone can put in their updates instead of send your updates to Bob, who will update it in.
That's what we have now.
And a halfway point is.
Web 2 project, we want to build off of the dot project.
Oh, okay. Web 2 project.
Web 2 project.
We've done wiki pages.
I've seen wiki pages. I think Twiki has a project management Gantt chart
Right.
builder.
RT looked promising for it too, though, because it had a, like,
Don't do it.
depends on and
Don't do it.
Oh,
Spy.
yeah,
It
you're.
never works.
It smells the same, but it's not the same. I mean, you can do it with just because RT has a depends on and a dependent on field. You could. It's just very time consuming to edit every ticket and to know the ticket number for each thing. Someone could make a whole different user interface that would use RT as a backend, but I really wouldn't want to do it that way.
I didn't mean to
Yeah.
completely off track.
No problem. I think you're in the running for a book because you've stumped the class. Okay, so
I don't have the new edition.
yeah, so dealing with I know one big problem is when you set a standard PC that you're going to use, both hardware and software, or either hardware or software. What do you do about the legacy systems? The basic technique is called ratcheting. A ratchet is a tool that only moves in one direction. Well, you declare this is the standard, and we're only going to move towards the standard. So all new machines have to be in that standard. All old machines, when they hit the 3-year mark, we decommission them. No, you can't take it home because you know you're going to come back and ask for support. No, you can't give it to the new intern because we don't want the interns to have the crap. The machine can't be supported. Either wipe and reload into the new standard, or also anytime it comes into the repair shop, it comes out as the new standard machine. So you want to offer upgrade paths. When we went through a process like this at Bell Labs, and everyone put back, oh, what if my software doesn't work under the new standard? So we set up, by every printer, we set up a machine with the new standard that they could walk up to, log in, try their software, and tell us what didn't work. And actually, in some cases, we would walk them over to that machine and say, I'm going to sit here and write down every bug you mentioned, and just in real time, write down every bug, and learn what they liked and didn't like, good collaboration, and I said, okay, give me 1 week and I'll fix all these things, and it improved to the standard. So, yeah. And it takes the fear out of it for the users, because your new standard, that does sound scary. I'm a big fan of checklists. Not everything can be automated. You can't automate, you can't write a Perl script that takes the box from the delivery dock, unboxes it, and puts it on someone's desk, right?
Are you sure?
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a CPAN module for that.
I'm sure there's, so,
there's a robotics lab the floor above where I work.
the Google,
A robot running Perl would scare the crap out of me.
yeah.
You're right, most of them run the MATLAB.
Logistics stuff.
Yeah, there's one of the, oh man, there is some project that, there's some Google project, like Google Earth started working with a lot of robotics people and stuff, so that like they now have like the robotics API for Google Earth, so like your robot can really know where it is. It's really scary. Okay, so you know, checklists are. My belief in checklists is you guys, by being smart enough to come to this awesome conference, you're obviously in the smart people camp. Smart people can create these checklists, and other people can follow them. Now, of course, the secret here is I often am following my own checklists because, like at my last company, very small shop, didn't hire very often, but when we did, I had to set up their Macintosh, and of course, I would forget, because if I do something every other month, I'm not going to be good at it. So I made my own little checklist, and I would follow it as if I was the junior admin doing what the senior admin had said needs to be on this checklist. Now, but anyway, the point here is that this is a good way of training people and sharing the power. So maybe you're smart enough to create the checklist. Everyone else in your group can be smart enough to follow the checklist. And when they have questions, they know who to come to. So this is a way of delegating, taking responsibility off of you and pushing it down, delegating. So it takes this high-level task, senior task, turns into something that more and more people can do. Also, it's easier to automate individual steps than try to automate the whole thing. So maybe step 4 is the really complicated task that everyone screws up. You can say, oh, I'm going to automate that one task. A lot less intimidating than trying to automate the whole thing, especially since that would involve taking a robotics course and all that kind of stuff. The result is you get consistency and repeatability. People love consistency and repeatability.
So do machines.
And so do machines. Yeah, so do machines. There's consistency is really important. I read an interview. Anyone here take the train to get to the conference? Amtrak? So Amtrak magazine, which by the way is the #1 train-based magazine, according to the online, had a, it was #2, then Conrail went out of business. Had an interview with the CEO of Chick-fil-A, the restaurant chain, and he said, consistency is incredibly important. He tells his franchise owners, our coffee's not the greatest. Starbucks has better coffee, but it's consistent. People would rather have consistently bad coffee, or bad in the same way every time, than it be a crapshoot every time. Think about it. You're faced with, do you want to buy coffee at this place or this place? Well, this place, we know it's bad, but we know what we're getting. It's consistent. And this place, sometimes it's awful, sometimes it's terrible. People will actually go to the consistent place. So maybe this standard machine that you deploy out always sets a certain preference in Excel to be the way that everyone hates, but they know that when they get a new machine, they can make that one change and everything else is good. So much better than half of your users have it set one way and half of your users have it set another way.
Consistency means you can predict. Predict, and everybody can then work around or work with or
Yeah.
adapt to.
Absolutely. Predictability is reassuring, right? I mean, think about, if you've read about like abusive parents, what really is, it's unpredictable. If you had abusive parents, you've grown up and you didn't have that comfort and consistency because your parents were sort of being random. What a great metaphor for IT departments. Okay, I didn't say that. We'll edit that out of the video. Okay.
Skip it.
Okay, so checklists are a lot like documentation with less pain. Before I said we're going to talk about how to write documentation without it being that painful documentation that no one likes to do. The checklists are very easy. So you can maintain it on a wiki and just make a bullet list. New users we set up a machine, we deploy it to their office, we create an account, maybe 10 things that you need to remember for every machine. If you want to do a little better job, under each bullet list, include the commands that you type to accomplish that goal. Or maybe link to a document if it's more complicated. I'm a big fan of, often the link on my checklist, it's a link to a new page, and it's just cut and paste. I did it once, I cut everything from that shell into it, and you know, it looks ugly, but it's there. And a coworker complains and says, Tom, that's crap, you just took a screenshot. Yes, but luckily, Bob, it's a wiki, which means if you really dislike it, you could rewrite it to be nice and pretty. When I left Cybernet, I spent my last week documenting everything I knew. And so I took our email architecture, and you know, it could take a month to use Visio to properly document your email. Email comes in here and flows and stuff. I knew I didn't have a month. So on the whiteboard, I had 5 different color magic markers, and I just drew it all really well and took a picture and put it on the wiki. And when people said, well, that's crap, why didn't you draw it in Visio? I said, well, luckily, Bob, it's a wiki. So if you don't like that, you can draw it in Visio. I'm told that 3 years later, when the company got bought by a bigger company, they dismantled the email system, they had just stuck with that for a while. It was good enough. I mean, a company with 20 employees, you shouldn't have to upgrade an email system at all.
I've used ASCII too.
Or ASCII, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And wikis also stay up to date faster. So if someone's following the checklist, they find the command that you listed didn't work, they can replace that command very quickly. Now, larger organizations make this a little more formal. So where I work, we separate policy and procedure. So policy is users will get the following 5 things when they join the department. The procedure is how to accomplish those 5 things. The policy can only be changed by management. The manager decided that users should also get, a bottle of water on their first day. Okay, that's a management decision. We added it to the policy. The procedure document says, okay, you can find the bottles of water in this refrigerator here. And that anyone can update because it's the technicians in the field that know what, they're dealing with reality as opposed to management that's dealing with what they'd like to see the world do. And someone once told me that IBM has a 3rd document. Are you familiar? And now, I shouldn't have even brought it up because I don't remember. It's policy, procedure, and then it begins with the letter P.
Practice?
Oh, practice. Yes, it's practice. So the guys in the trenches who are like, the wiring techs and the crafts people, plumbers, electricians and stuff, they have the document that is the equivalent to, have you ever gone into a wiring closet and on the wall they've written things in, and I can never understand it, but an electrician looks at it and says, oh yeah, so, and he knows, he can just read it and just know everything on that patch panel. Well, it's the electronic equivalent of that. It's sort of like the graffiti edition, and so the technicians can edit that practice. The more senior people can edit the procedure, and managers can edit the policy. So that's really formal, but hey, on a wiki, you just slam it all into one document. It's better than nothing. And in fact, I recommend document what you dislike doing. Remember, this is all about taking something that only I can do and making it into something that's delegatable. Maybe you're not smart enough to build the backup system, but I can certainly write a document that trains you how to add a new server to the currently existing backup system, do a restore of a file and an entire disk. So these are the things I dislike doing, so I document them so that they become easier to delegate. And also, how would you like to be able to hire an assistant? How would you like to be able to convince your boss to hire you an assistant? Sounds crazy. Well, this is how I did it. So I went to my boss, and my boss came to me actually and said, Tom, the company's grown large enough that it's time to get a second system administrator. And you're doing such a good job, we want to hire a clone of you. I said, boss, I'm going to make you a superstar. And I'm going to save you money. Instead of hiring someone that's as senior as me, we're going to hire a junior person, which is going to save you money, and then we're going to mentor them, and if they do a good job, we'll promote from within and train them into the senior position. And your MBA textbooks told you that promoting from within is always better than hiring outsiders, so boy, will you look like a great little MBA. And he said, how are you going to do that? I said, well, job ads are, well, I didn't say you're going to hire me an assistant. what I said is job ads have two parts, right? The first part is what is the person going to be doing, and the second part is what skills are required. Well, on my wiki page, it's this list of all the tasks I don't like to do. And if you click on any of them, you get the checklist. New users, checklist. How to delete user, when someone leaves the company, when someone gets a new server, when someone gets a new PC, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, that first part of the job description, what are they doing? That's the table of contents. They will be handling new user introduction, user exits, new servers, new workstations, new this, new that. Thank you. And then the second part of the job ad, which is what skills are required, well, we'll drill down into each of these pages and see, well, this first one requires Linux experience, the second one requires basic networking experience, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's the second part of the job ad. Must have experience with Linux, TCP/IP networking, blah, 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 blah. The job ad wrote itself. Then we hired this person, his name is Glenn, and I had an assistant to do all the tasks that I didn't like to do, which means I could focus on big projects, which is what I do like to do. And Glenn was excited because Glenn, as a junior sysadmin, was getting to be mentored by a senior person instead of his previous job where it was like trial by fire. At least we had all these checklists. So I'd say, hey, we have a new employee starting. Glenn, it's you. So follow this checklist to do all the things to bring you into the company. And if he got to anything he didn't, so I didn't have to micromanage him because he had the checklist. And if he had a question, he could come to me and I could answer the question. And I could manage this person very well because I knew, at Glenn's level, within 6 months, he should be able to handle all of these without asking questions. So I had a benchmark to know, is this new employee working out? And I got my own assistant to do all the crap I didn't like to do. Did I mention I got my own assistant? And we saved money. He was cheaper to hire than a senior person, and promoting from within, as I said, is awesome. So this worked really well. Amazingly enough, so I then left the company. Glenn was now the senior person. He took over. And then I was at my next company, and then Google hired me. And when I left, I said, well, we need someone to replace me. And I called Glenn, and we hired him. And on his first day, he looks at my wiki page, and it's like the same damn table of contents. I'm like, yeah, and guess what? The checklists are going to look really familiar. And since I'm leaving in a week, you only have a week to get up to speed. But actually, by that time, Glenn was pretty senior, and he said that at the previous company, he was now creating the new checklist. And when he left that company, he was training his person, and really leaving that company was pretty easy for him. There's often a lot of stress about leaving a company. How will they survive without me? Well, this was, thank God I can get out of this bad job, because, and it's all documented. Which brings me, often people say, well, if I document my job too well, doesn't that make me, doesn't that put my job in jeopardy? I believe that the opposite is true. If I have 5 sysadmins working for me and I have to get rid of one of them, I'm going to keep the person that documents it. Because that person's a force multiplier. And that's a military term. Force multiplier, if you're fighting hand to hand, that's a certain amount of force. But giving people guns, that's a force multiplier. Now, one person can do what it used to take hundreds of people to do, right? A good checklist is a force multiplier. I have taken these tasks and made it so that anyone can do it. It also makes my stress a lot less when I go on vacation. I used to be terrified of taking vacations. Now, when I go on vacation, I know I have these checklists. When I come back from vacation, the worst thing that's ever happened is people have said, well, we had this one checklist. We got to step 3. We didn't know what to do. And, we decided that can wait till you come back. And that's really perfect, because all the other checklists, they're able to execute. Awesome. So checklists reduce stress on vacation, help you hire an assistant, increase repeatability and consistency, which helps your users, and also shares the joy. You don't want to be the one hogging all the difficult tasks. You want to share the joy with all your teammates. So we talked about those things. Okay, so before we go into any questions about checklists before we move on?
Okay, you said they used your photograph?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they just shellac the whiteboard?
Because the people that took over were in London.
Oh, they don't like shellac?
They don't like shellac.
They didn't have a paintbrush that long.
The people I left behind didn't know the difference between shellac and shinola. Oh!
Give yourself a book.
Awesome. Okay. Okay, so next section. How are we doing on time? We got an hour left. Let's talk about improving your psychic ability. Planning around the business cycle and knowing what, so this is actually two very different things. Planning around the business cycle and knowing what's wrong for our users. But they're in the opposite order. Okay, so service modeling. It's better to notice a problem before your customers do. So if it's like having ESP about what's going on in the network. I feel a great disturbance in the force. Without monitoring, you only know if a server is down because you feel the pain or a user of yours feels the pain and calls you. Now, for a small environment, that might be okay. In fact, the first person that ever tried to sell me a monitoring system, I was like, oh, I have a monitoring system already. My phone rings if anything goes down. And the salesperson said, you do? That's amazing. How does that work? I said, well, if anything goes down, my users call me. It's not a complicated PBX. So what you'd rather have is the customers call and be told, well, actually, I'm already working on it. Another way of looking at it is can you develop higher perceived uptime? So if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, did it make a noise? Well, the system equivalent is if a file server died on a Saturday afternoon and you fixed it before Monday at 9 a.m., was there really an outage? Well, if your SLA says our file service is Monday through Friday 9 to 5, there wasn't an outage by your SLA's definition. And certainly, it's a lot better for people to come in on Monday morning and get emails saying, we're very sorry that there was an outage this weekend. We believe it was fixed by Sunday at 2 p.m. If you have problems, please send an email to help. That's a lot better than you swander in to work a little hungover on Monday morning and it's 10 a.m. and you're told, people have been sitting around not able to work for the last 2 hours because you're just getting in, right? So monitoring is very important to our users' happiness. And it also helps us predict and avoid future problems. So a common problem is the internet connection gets overloaded. And we say, okay, I'll fix it. I'll put in an order with the ISP to give us more bandwidth. Well, that order takes 8 weeks. So that's going to be 2 months of things sucking. With monitoring, you can monitor utilization, and you can build a graph that says, do I have a picture of that? I have a picture of that later. So I'll get to that later. So if you aren't monitoring it, you can't call it a service. This is one of my philosophies. If you're not monitoring it, you're just running a bunch of software. So there's two kinds of monitoring, real-time monitoring and historical monitoring. Real-time monitoring is, how are we right now? Are all of our servers up? It's the kind of thing that gives you a web page with a dashboard, and if all the icons are green, that's good, and anything that's red means that's a server down. And historical monitoring is about how are we compared to last month or last quarter or last year. This is a long-term analysis. This is usually for uptime and utilization. So how much of our internet bandwidth are we using? Well, we're at 20% this time last year. We're at 50% today. We look at the graph and we can project into the future that we're going to be at 75% or 100% by this month. And now I'm ordering more bandwidth 8 weeks before we need it, not when it's too late. In fact, okay, so real-time monitoring. I think I already, okay. So is server 5 up? Is our web server accessible? Is NFS service too slow right now? Better than ping to determine if something's up, it's better to do the service. So NFS might be responding, but, better than saying, are we getting NFS replies when we do a query, is we getting the replies within a certain amount of time. Is email getting through? Is any file system through? So it's nice to get an alert that says, file system such and such is at 90% full, and that gives you time to fix it before it hits 100% full, and thereby preventing an outage that users would have felt. There's a lot of good real-time monitoring systems. Nagios is very popular. Or what do people use for monitoring here? Big Brother? Okay, Big Brother has the best screenshots on their webpage, so they win. So here's a bunch of servers, a bunch of things that the server could do, either a green icon that means it's up, or a dash that means that server isn't even running that service. And then
It also makes a great wallpaper.
it also makes a great wallpaper. Can it do that? That'd be awesome. Your wallpaper on your screen.
Put a snapshot and make a wallpaper.
Yeah, yeah.
And everything's
Yeah,
green
just have a
wallpaper.
shelf.
I'm sure someone has a web as a
Just have a cron job, you know, curl the page every
on
5
job,
minutes.
crawl the page, turn it into a bitmap, and send it as your. Sure.
Explain the train schedules.
And you can make subsets of your servers can be its own page. So maybe this is the previous page is the global view, but then, so this is Sean's house, all the things related to Sean's house. This is nice if you're servicing like 3 different departments. You could say, tell the finance people, hi, this is the page I made just for you with all your servers on it. If you ever think that things are down, you can look at this before you call me. And red means I've already, so this red icon means I've already been paged, so you don't need to contact me. Historical monitoring answers the question, when will we need to purchase more, say, bandwidth for something? Or what percentage of time are emails usable, email servers usable? When is our web server the busiest? Cricket is, Cricket and MRTG are 2 of the most popular historical monitoring tools. They're both based on a database called RRD tool. And they produce great graphs that look like this. So this is on a network interface. The green is average bits into the interface and blue is out. And you can see that around 1800 hours seems to be the busiest time of the day for our users. And there's this big spike here and here, which might mean something bad was happening. Right, so here's another graph. My favorite graphs, oh, so here's one. That here's the last couple hours and here's a week-long summary. So see, every day we have this consistent pattern, and then this was when we had the big outage. And when we look at this today, we can see exactly when it started. It started right afternoon and was gone for a couple hours. This is file service. I need to add a slide. Often what you see is so this is hourly, daily, or daily graph. You can also generate like yearly graphs. So when it's summarized down to yearly graph, you see this nice smooth growth. And you can tell your most non-technical CFO, you can say, this is our connection to the internet. Notice the green line is its trajectory is going up and up and up. And this person doesn't have to understand bits and bytes, but they understand if you tell them, look, full is here, and if you, with your finger, you draw across, you could see, how many months do you think we're going to be at the full point? And he's, oh, about 2 months. Right. And it takes 2 months to order more bandwidth. Oh, so we should order new bandwidth now. Oh, well, you think so? Okay, I'll write it up and you can sign it. Much better than you really need to sign this. Really, the best thing you can ever do with the CFO is get them to say, so we need blah, 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 instead of you tell them that you need blah. And a nice visual depiction will work every time. Yes?
I went in one day and said, my advanced disaster alert system went off. And we are now in the yellow zone. And so we need to move on help people in finance.
Yeah, that's explaining it in a way that a CFO understands. Another tip I got, someone was talking to me earlier in the conference, they said rather than measuring utilization, you measure some kind of pain point. So bandwidth at 80% and higher is considered a pain point for our users. And according to this graph, we hit into the pain point section 10 times this week. And maybe, maybe it used to be only once a month, now it's once a week, now it's 10 times a week. If you say a progression like that, the most non-technical person will understand, oh, okay, we need to fix that, right? Well, I don't understand what your solution is, but go do it. Okay, $10,000, oh, okay. Then they understand the value. $10,000 equals reducing this pain. Maybe that's too much, maybe that's reasonable, but you have a basis for discussing. And he keeps raising his hand.
Didn't you used to do that at a different company? Green good, red bad?
Yeah. When I was at Lumeta, our security scans, we'd map people's network, and we'd, in a flash of brilliance, we decided, maybe the stuff that's good we should color green, and the stuff that's bad we should color red. And yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
One caveat about graphs like this, because we used them in a previous job that I had. Managers love pretty pictures, but they don't always understand them, and there may be some training involved, so that when he looks at this graph, not this particular one, but when he looks at a graph and he sees the spike, you may have to tell him that, yes, there was a spike last night, but going from 1 bit per second to 10 bits per second wasn't a problem.
Yeah, and
there's to look at the multiplier.
So there's a problem with this graph. This, the scale is 0 to 60 meg.
Yeah.
This, it's 0 to 40 meg.
And you can, a lot of times, you can set that to a fixed.
And with Cricket, you can do that. And I recommend that you set the scale to be 0 to, for 100 megabit Ethernet, 0 to 100, so that the comparisons are apples to apples. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I got 2 things. First of all, I have not yet set up a monitoring tool like this. It's on my to-do list. And one of the things that intrigued me was I found a plugin for Nagios that will tie into RT and automatically create a ticket when a service goes down.
Yeah.
And if the service goes back up, it'll close the ticket.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
But I don't have it set up yet.
That's good stuff. So I saw someone wrote a Nagios snippet of code to there's an SNMP variable that pulls the firmware version off your Dell RAID card. And so they set a monitoring rule, alert me if the firmware revision isn't version 1, 2, 3. And so when they get a card back from repairs and slam it in and forget to upgrade the firmware, they can start getting alerts. Yeah.
So there's some dude named Tron in Norway who wrote Check Up and Manage, and it does what you're talking about. It'll sweep through Up and Manage and check firmware versions for you. Out of box, basically, along with all the other stuff.
Cool, and it's called Tron?
No, it's called Check Up and Manage. But some dude in the basement at the University of Norway writes it. It's probably the best managed plugin.
Oh, cool. Oh, so it's a Nagios thing. Oh, awesome. Okay. Yeah, so Nagios is good. But, let me just warn people, the one mistake I made the first time I ever tried to monitor stuff is I put it on auto discovery and said, discover every machine on my network, and it found 1,000 machines, and it was monitoring, and the machine became overloaded, it couldn't handle monitoring that many individual items, and B, I had 1,000 alerts, and I was alerting on someone shut off their desktop. Well, yeah, so every day at 5 o'clock I get 1 million alerts. It was totally useless. My recommendation for monitoring is bootstrap yourself with a very small thing. Is this one machine up or down? And then every time you have an outage, as part of your post-mortem process, think, okay, what monitoring rules should we have so that we would detect this in the future? Okay, we're going to test all file servers, or we're going to test this aspect of our email servers, or whatever, and organically grow over time. And as you get more comfortable with the system, you might just say, okay, well, we're going to add this rule for all of our file servers or all of our whatever, but do start small. Yes.
You had said earlier, Tom, that today, because this happened in the morning, earlier, anyway, that for some of your systems you set up the non-use first, and you can see all the indicators and the build.
Yes.
You kind of reconcile those two viewpoints.
Well, this was a bootstrapping process.
So, yeah, that trade,
right.
you're
So
fine.
now I've bootstrapped to the point where all new email servers, there's
You have a
18 things we
profile.
monitor about it. So we're bringing a new email server up. We put it in the monitoring system with a flag that says, "This is alert, but don't send a page." And when it goes red, then we know we're done.
Tom,
Yeah.
if you're gonna set up a notification thing from Nagios to your ticket system, make sure your notifications are set up right, because you only get alerted once.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what was exciting about putting fine to that.
I have not set it up that up yet.
I just want the name of it. That's enough for me.
I don't know the name, I have to Google it.
One-
It's there.
Okay.
Google
One
knows it.
caveat, we also run our own network, and the network folks set Nagios up first, and a design requirement for them was that they designed a component that Nagios could talk to, that it would then call out over a landline to, and use voice synthesization to say what the problem was.
Right.
Because if the network's down, they can't get pages, they can't get emails.
Yeah. So often the way you send out an alert to your pager is one of the components that will go down. So you need to come up with some alternative. A good place to start though is just send email to yourself, or send email to yourself and the email address that goes to your text message system, and then you could improve upon that. There's you can put an analog modem on your machine and dial out to a tap service.
Yeah, Linux Journal had an article about 2-3 months ago about setting up an SMS gateway to send out text messages over the cellular network.
Okay. Yeah, when I get page, I get email, I get a text to my phone, I get a pager. So we have on-call rotation. So I'm on call for 8 hours a day for 1 week, basically 1 week out of 6. So during my 8 hours, I'm carrying a physical pager, which is a two-way pager. And also I get a phone call from one of my coworkers set up what's the open source telephony system?
Asterisk.
He set up an Asterisk server, so you get a phone call that says, "Hi, this is Telebot," and tries to read you this page, which is always hilarious.
Yeah, Dave Josephson had an article in Usenix Login, I think November maybe, was saying the same thing, saying the Linux Journal one. And there was a thread all about that. People were discussing different implementations on the Back Bailey signaling list. Either that or Boston Linux and user group.
Yeah.
Recently.
There's an article on the Asterisk version in Sysadmin magazine 2 years ago, when it still existed.
Right.
So everyone's writing about it.
Something that speaks the TAP protocol is called, I know Hylafax also speaks the TAP protocol, and since you already have a modem on your fax server, it just works really well. I don't recommend, there's something called IXO-CICO, which I wrote a long time ago, and I've been trying to kill it ever since, because it was like my first open source project ever. Don't use it. There's 50 other things that are much better. Anyway, let's move on.
A cheaper way that I've actually been considering, one of my colleagues who graduated from my university and so has an account does, is just find a cheap way to monitor your site from the outside. Monitor your monitoring box. Pingdom will ping it for like $5 a month, or in the case of my colleague, he has a shell account. He has a cron job set to ping his firewall gateway, and if it doesn't answer back, it pages him.
Yeah, there's a lot of services that for free will do basic monitoring of your website, just an HTTP query and tell you if that fails. And then for more money, they'll do more monitoring. And those are great because that's really, if you're a web property, your concern isn't can you get to it, your concern is can external users get to it. So rather than setting up a box at someone's home, yeah, this company can do it, and these companies will do it from 5 continents and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. So there are a lot of different ways of querying a server. You can ping it, you can send a TCP connection. The best thing is to do an actual query Like a lot of e-commerce sites have a fake account and they'll fake purchase a book once an hour. Google does certain Google queries. If Britney Spears isn't the first, if her fan club isn't the first thing when you search for Britney Spears, someone gets paged. Not a real example. It's Justin Bieber. Okay. I'm going to skip the SMTP stuff because this is sort of a ramble. SMTP is basically a way of collecting statistics from routers and file servers and other stuff. SMTP is...
You mean
SMTP is email. So there's two big problems with this acronym. One is it's too close to SMTP, and I always say the wrong one. The other thing is it stands for the Simple Network Monitoring Protocol. Now, simple modifying the N or the M or the P.
Yes.
Is it a simple way of doing? Is it only capable of monitoring simple networks? Is it a simple monitoring system, or is it a simple protocol? Well, the answer is it failed on all three.
It's just simple.
But there's these variables, which they call MIBs, because why would they name it something that people understand? So there's these MIBs, and MIBs are like Ethernet dot, interface 5 dot, number of bits in the last hour. And so you can send a query that says, give me the answer to this variable. And you get back, some integer. And the MIBs are standardized. So there's every Ethernet NIC has a MIB that should be the same on all vendors, whether it's a file server or a router. And there's MIBs for TCP, IP related things, and Ethernet related things, and ATM related things, and disk related things. And so if you know the MIB, if you know that your file server supports the file service MIB, then you know there's these 10,000 variables that it supports. Well, 100 variables that each disk will respond to. And so, for example, sys.sysname is the MIB that is the name of the device. And IP packets in interface 5 is the packets received on interface number 5, like a Cisco router or a Sun or a Windows box. And this MIB variable is the packet sent. So you query these things, and what Cricket is spending half of its time doing is calling out to all these machines and saying, give me the value to this MIB number, and it gets back these integers and stores it in a database. And then the other half of what Cricket does is takes this database and draws the pretty graphs. But monitoring isn't free. It consumes bandwidth. So I have a sort of worst case example. If your collector machine is in the middle, and it's collecting from machines all over your global network, this link is going to get hit twice as hard as these two links. If your collector is that machine up there, that last leg is going to be hit really hard. So you want to be careful about which machine you use to collect this information, because it's generating a lot of traffic. It also consumes a lot of disk space, which is less of a problem now that we have terabyte disks. But back in the 200 or 400 gig disk days, it was like 200 meg disk days. It was difficult to keep up with all the data. And a lot of systems, like Cricket's claim to fame is or RRD, the database that Cricket uses, its big win is that it uses a fixed amount of disk space because it stores every single detail for the last week, but then stuff that's a lot older than that, it summarizes down to like hourly statistics and keeps those for like 6 months, and things after 6 months, it averages down, it keeps like daily averages or something like that. So you can, once you have been monitoring for a certain amount of time, it's a fixed amount of disk space, because it's always this detail, less detail, less detail situation. Skip. And good monitoring systems can monitor a whole have plugins and let you monitor a whole bunch of different things, from ping to do an actual SQL query. A plug for Mon. Plug for Mon, because it was invented in New Jersey, is a really nice monitoring system. And one of the smartest things that Mon did is someone made system that generates web pages that look just like Big Brother, but all the data collection is not. Let me just blast through some of this stuff. So monitoring system, real-time monitoring systems then have alerting systems. So there's collecting the data, and then there's either, well, for historical data, you collect the data and then graph it. For real-time monitoring, you collect the data, and then you decide whether or not you're going to send a message to your pager. It's called alerting. So monitoring packages have different alerting mechanisms: email, pager, phone, automatically opening tickets, like I was mentioned before. And like someone said, your alerting system shouldn't depend on the network that's being monitored. In fact, often people set up 2 monitoring systems and each one monitors the other one. Now, I talked about bootstrapping yourself by starting small and monitoring 1 or 2 little things. That's a good way to bootstrap yourself, but eventually where you want to get to is the point where you have a written service level agreement and you're now monitoring conformance to that service level agreement. So your service level agreement might be that the web server will always be able to respond to simple, static queries within 200 milliseconds. Or that your email service, if you relay an email out to an ISP and back in the company, it should come back within 3 seconds. So first you write down an English policy like that, and then you try to write the rules into your alert system that would verify conformance to that. You might want to verify conformance to the exact rule and conformance to the rule minus 20%. So when you're at the 80th percentile of, which is sort of 20%, if your system was 20% worse, you would get an alert. That's a good thing to monitor because you know that you're getting close to capacity.
Tom, I
Yeah.
realize you're short on time, but quick question.
Sure.
When you say SLA, do you mean that internally too? Because I tend to think of SLA as you have a contract with the customer, and if you fail to meet the SLA, there's financial or other penalties. And people use SLA internally, but there doesn't seem to be anything that backs it up in the way that it's. And also, it's an agreement, but it's SLA. It says SLA, but there's nothing that backs it up, and oftentimes it is an agreement. Instead, like at my university, Central IT says these are our SLAs, but I don't think they negotiate anything with that. They're like, here, have an SLA. And if they fail to meet it, then people are like, you failed to meet your SLA. Oh well.
That's because someone read a book that said that every server should have an SLA, and they missed the part of the chapter where it said that SLA should be agreed upon by the customers. Yeah. So SLA is used to mean many different things. Your SLA with your ISP often has a penalty that, for any downtime, if we miss our SLA, we'll refund your ISP bill that month. But it doesn't have to have that kind of penalty. The penalty might be just as a management technique. We're going to monitor the SLA for our internal file servers and try to stay within 5 nines of uptime. And maybe we're within that SLA all but you set up almost an artificial metric, but you say there were 5 days of this month where we didn't hit our SLA, and now that we have the infrastructure to monitor that, we can see that we were 5 days, 5 days, 4 days. Okay, now we know we're going in the right direction. 4 days, 3 days, 2 days. So you've established a way of monitoring yourself over time, and so there's no punishment. No one's getting a refund for not hitting the SLA, but it's a way for management to know how good we're doing.
Do you think the name matters? Because I've heard other names used instead of service level agreement, calling it, I don't know, targeted service level or something like that.
Targeted service level, yeah, I'm not big into names. I think eventually the industry does tend to converge on a good name for something. But I wouldn't push it in this one instance. I would say that if you're doing better than your SLA by an order of magnitude, you should be punished. So if you're not meeting, if your goal is 3 nines, which means that you're up 99.9% of the time, which is about an hour of downtime a month. If that's your goal, if you're hitting 4 nines or 5 nines, well, actually, if you're only hitting 2 nines, then obviously management should apply some resources to fix the problem. But if you are hitting 4 nines or 5 nines, you should also be punished. You've architected a system that is over-engineered. You've used crazy expensive grade systems where software grade systems might have been justified. So I believe that if you're going to punish people for not meeting their SLAs, you really want to focus on staying within, say, 10% of an SLA. Thank you. But in terms of this class, just have an SLA is a good first step.
But you don't want to punish them for exceeding SLAs because then they'll have delivered downtime.
They'll have deliberate downtime. Yeah. So, oh good, we have a half an hour. That's good for part 2 and some Q&A. But we've been doing Q&A all along, which is good. I like that. Okay, so any more questions about monitoring before we move on? And what software do people recommend? I heard Nagios and...
Nagios. Not Big Brother.
Not Big Brother.
Not Mon.
Not Mon. Have you used Mon?
In 1998.
In 1998? Okay.
But, so Nagios is bulletproof, but it's kind of hard. So if you want something easy, there's some new project called Monit, I believe. It's like real small and brain dead easy, but works and scales. And
okay.
It's designed to take corrective action too, right?
it can take corrective action or just wake you up.
I think Nagios also has a fork at this point now, too.
There's several.
They do, yeah, but that might have been more, my understanding is it might have been more commercial, that there were people who were productizing Nagios in Europe, and it was more having to do with the fact that they have a commercial product than that.
There's also something called Nessus?
Nessus?
No, right. No, it's...
Dead Vigil?
No, it begins with an N, and they're trying to be, it's open source, but the commercial version has extra features, and they're trying to build a community around it, and it's big. It's like, it's trying to be, it's very heavyweight, so I didn't play around with it much.
There's a couple of those.
I'll think of it. No, it's
Xenos?
Xenos. Yeah, Xenos.
Yeah, that's
Xenon.
Yeah.
On the side. That's easy, but yeah, really, really fat.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I went fast over the slide, but historical monitoring, software that does it really well, is often very different than the software that does real-time monitoring really well. So I highly recommend a combination of Cricket for historical and Nagios for real-time. Okay. So your new job at a site with many problems. So I, many years ago, started at a site that was really sort of an IT disaster. And it was a good opportunity for me to pull a lot of these ideas into play. And so I'm going to talk about what I went through there. Now, one thing that dawned on me at the time was there's this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a social science construct that these are the needs that humans have. There's physiological need, like shelter and food and stuff. I'm sorry, food is physiologically a need. And then a higher level need is safety, so shelter. And an even higher level need is, love, your social kind of things. And then higher level need is esteem, feeling good about yourself. And then the highest level is self-actualization, the empowerment, control over your environment. And it's hard to get to one without having the other. So when, if you see a homeless person, they're not too concerned with the fact that they don't have a yacht. But you have a multimillionaire, and boy, their yacht isn't as nice as the other people's yachts, and I'm so depressed. So that's because the millionaire has these basic needs met, and they can start thinking about these other things. But if you don't have shelter, if you're homeless, yeah, your important thing would be, the important things in your life are going to be the physiological things. Do you have food? And actually, recently, evolutionary biologists have discovered that, like, the brain is really constructed this way. That being able to survive to tomorrow has more importance in the brain than bettering your environment. So if I offer you $10, your brain says, oh, that's a good thing. If I offer to take $10 away from you, your brain says, number one priority, I have to stop that. Because when we were evolving in the a couple million years ago, this was, if you lose today, that means you're dead and you don't have a tomorrow. Having a better tomorrow is nice, but more important is I want to live till tomorrow. Anyway, so how can we apply this to IT? I don't exactly know, but this is my draft. This is my Tom's hierarchy of user needs. The basic need is, can I get my job done now? I don't care that there's an outage. I just need to get this thing printed. Jam the printer directly into my laptop and let me print it, right? I have a deadline. If you're confident that you can get your job done now, then a higher order need is, can I always get my job done? And that's sort of confidence. The network here is pretty stable. I'm confident I can get my job done. When you don't have that, that looks like the environment where people are working around you or coming up with homebrew solutions, or I saw one just a network that was so unreliable that people started demanding personal printers directly attached to their machine because they didn't have this confidence. But when they did get that confidence, then the whole political issue of people getting personal printers went away. We went on to the next highest level thing. Do I feel I can get my job done in the future? Which is a new order of confidence. This is confidence now, confidence in the future. And then the highest order is self-sufficiency. Can I manage my own environment? Users that are demanding root, like root on their workstation, are up here. They want control over their environment. If they want root because they're fixing these things, that's very different than they want root because they're building new services and stuff. Hopefully, as sysadmins, we can provide self-service functions. So, for example, if someone needs root because they want to assign their own IP address, that's bad. But if we use DHCP so that their assignment happens automatically, this is up here. Or if people who, when an employee wants to be able to use the VPN system, if all they have to do is go to a wiki page which tells them install this device driver and you're done, then they're up at this level. They are self-sufficient. So it's a little bit of philosophy about where we're really trying to go with our users. Now, I joined this company because I like a good challenge. Actually, I joined this company because they said I could, because their New Jersey office was 2 blocks from my house. And I figured, well, if this turns out really bad, I'll leave after 6 months and it'll only be a 6-month delay. And I was unemployed at the time. So, I stayed there 2 years and it was a valuable learning experience. And they warned me that their IT infrastructure was really screwed up. This is a company of 100 people, about 10 in the US and 90 in London, and one of the US offices was 2 blocks from my house. So I go in, and boy, their London office was having problems on all these levels, and their Maryland office was having problems on these 2 levels. So when I started thinking in terms of these, I thought, wow, okay, now this is helping me clarify my priorities. There's 1,000 things that need to be fixed here. I need to fix these things first, and then start working up the chain. So my general strategy, another way of looking at that general strategy was, step one, stop the hemorrhaging. The patient's bleeding. Step one, we got to stop the hemorrhaging. So I had to stabilize the network, the servers and email, get things backed up because, God, I don't know if this thing is just going to collapse in a day, and at least I should have good backups. So do manual backups if I have to, just to get snapshots. Take any server that the boot disk wasn't mirrored and set it up to mirror that boot disk. Because some of these servers, no one in the company knows how to rebuild it if that disk totally collapsed and the company would literally cease to function. And so this was my first couple months, stop the hemorrhaging. And during that time, in doing that, I also learned enough about the user's needs. I met everyone, I traveled to the London office, and it was became very aware to me that there's 5 basic management apps that people were going to need. Now, at the time, I had written this book a couple of years earlier, and I thought, wow, what everyone needs to do is everything in this book. And when people say, what's the most important thing? I'd say, I don't know. But boy, being in this war zone, yeah, it was really obvious. I knew exactly what these people needed. I said, these are the fundamental things that you need. You need a ticket tracking system and monitoring, because ticket tracking for all the reasons we mentioned before, monitoring, because I can't be in London all the time. Documentation, because the IT department I inherited, I was director of IT, I had 4 people working for me, and with, let's say, a very wide variation of competencies, and I was going to need to start documenting what they were doing. Let me say, as a part of the one of the basic forms of documentation was not just setting up a wiki, but buying a Brother P-Touch label maker and saying, we're going to go through this rack and we're going to label everything. I said, I'm going to start small. So I was in the London office and I gave the label maker to one of my IT guys and said, why don't you go in and just label the mail server and the main file server, and then we'll try to figure out what those other machines are. And he came back to me 15 minutes later. He said, Tom, I have a question. Sure. What do you need? He said, how do I use this? And I said, okay, I've just inherited an IT department where the guys can't figure out how to use a Brother P-Touch. This is a bad situation. It turned out, yeah, we're just going to turn off the video camera at this point. It turned out most of these people had worked in the mailroom and had learned how to, like at home, they knew how to install the OS on their friends' PCs, and so it sort of become the IT department. Okay, so remote control was important because from the New Jersey office, I was really going to need to be able to remotely administer all these machines until I could either train these people or replace them with higher skilled people, and automated backups. So when we were trying to stop the hemorrhaging, manual backups were okay. I didn't mind telling these people, you're going to change this tape every week, and I'm going to log into the machine to make sure it was actually done. But automated backups was definitely one of those. And then once these things happened, things were getting a lot better. And it was, oh, no, actually, all the while, we needed to manage the visibility with both the management and the customers. And I was very honest and pessimistic. So with the management, I had management meetings where I said, well, I've now been here 4 weeks. This is my assessment of your environment. It's really bad. And with the users, I wasn't as pessimistic just talking to users, but I was trying to be hopeful and say, yeah, things are bad, but you know, it's going to take a long time, but we're working on fixing these things. And I kept tried to keep a lot of communication about what we were doing to fix things. And always phrasing things in ways that were valuable to the user. So I didn't say we're going to install a monitoring system. It was, you know how on Monday you come in and the servers crashed over the weekend and no one was able to, they didn't get rebooted until Monday morning? Well, we're installing a system that'll notice these problems over the weekend, so hopefully I can fix them before you get in on Monday. People saw the value. Okay. So firefighting, there was a lot of well, the whole team was spending almost all their time putting out fires, or spending so much time mopping the floor they don't have time to fix the leak. Sort of a mixed metaphor. You can't firefight and have a leak, because the leak would put out the fire. So I had to identify the biggest time sinks. Turns out, from the junior guys to the senior guy, most of their work was being wrecked by the fact that every day someone had a virus destroy their machine and they had to run and repair. So I didn't have permission to hire a Windows person that could just get our Windows environment up to speed with automatic patches and virus scanning and stuff. But what I did do is I finagled with management. I said, I demonized this. There's one thing that's preventing my guys from getting anything done, and it is this virus problem. And I want to bring in a temp contractor that can just focus on this so that my guys are free to do the projects that you managers want to see get done. And they said, oh, we don't. You're just trying to bring in more people. We don't want a person. And said, okay, so here's the deal. First of all, my boss is paying for this, not you. Second of all, can't you agree to a 6-month contract? So they agreed to a 6-month contract. And it turns out, so this, part of this, the difficulty here was that I was in New Jersey, the big problem was in London. And I needed someone remote in London that I could count on. So really getting viruses eradicated, any generic Windows person would do. So really I hired the first person that sounded confident and competent. And it worked really well. So we got the biggest time sink taken care of. So one person dedicated on fixing this. And the manager who was most adamant that we didn't need to hire this person, when we got to the end of the 6-month contract and I was proposing that we extend the contract, it was that manager that said, oh, well, why don't we consider making him a full-time employee? Yeah, because suddenly his machine was working well. And actually, more important, his machine always worked well. It was his direct reports stopped saying, oh, I didn't get anything done today. I didn't get your project done today because my machine died. That was even more important. So I looked for a problem that many problems with the same cause and fixed that, and sold it to management. And I actually sold it to them as time spent by my senior people on this very menial task. And the ones with more operational experience said, hey, maybe we should hire someone. Yes?
Part of the problem I've found is that a lot of organizations don't want to spend any extra money.
Yes.
And it's hard to do. And half the battle is convincing them that the time is better spent, purchasing that piece of test equipment or getting that 6-month contract for somebody.
Sure. If you spend money and it directly makes money, you hire a new salesperson, they bring in new revenue. That's obvious. You hire someone that supports salespeople, well, okay, that's a little obvious. If it makes the salesperson 20% more productive and they cost 20% the salary of the salesperson, sort of. And then you get IT, which is like, well, keeping the file servers running, I know that helps the person that helps the salesperson that helps bring in revenue. Yeah, it's hard. So it's useful to put things in terms of, it will be data driven and say, my team is spending this amount of time, your salespeople are spending this amount of time every day, or your salespeople have generated this many tickets, and each one takes on average 2 hours long. And if I could do this project, we'd eliminate that, and that would save people 2 hours of time. Adam has his hand up.
I think there's a talk tomorrow about budgeting and getting percent involved.
Yes, Adam's doing a talk on budgeting, and we'll cover a lot of that stuff tomorrow.
But without a ticket tracking system or things like that, how do you provide that data?
Oh, hand waving in this case. So there was actually another advantage I had. As the new person, when you're hired as the new director of IT, everyone gives you the benefit of the doubt for like the first month. So in that first month, hire someone. Or do that big expenditure or whatever. Yeah, so I played on that. Also, I had a boss I reported to the VP of Operations, and she was very supportive. And I actually sat down with her and said, help me explain this in terms that the other managers would understand. And so by the time we got to the end of that conversation, she was convinced also. Yeah. So when we were firefighting, we had to do a lot of quick fixes, which I hate to do. I'm a long-term fix kind of guy, but you gotta be able to make this month's payroll, so it's doing the quick fixes. But for any quick fix I put in, I had a wiki page of things, what is the long-term fix that we need to do someday? I called this the parking lot. So when people would come to me and say, we should have a blah, blah, we should have a $1 billion single sign-on system with automated blah, 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 I'd say, yeah, that's great, I'll put that in the parking lot. The first 72 hours as a new manager, actually this comes from, a lot of this is stuff I did, and then I sent an email to the Sage members mailing list saying, I'm taking a survey, what should I do in my first 72 hours as a new manager? And there was a lot of good observations. So carry a notebook and write everything down, because you're getting flooded with information. Don't do anything, just observe. Make it obvious that you're the newbie, so people are giving up more information to you. Make friends with the secretarial staff. There's a book called The First 90 Days, Critical Success Strategies for New Leaders at All Levels, which someone recommended. Meet with the entire team and individually with senior members. So especially for a big IT team, you want to meet with all of them so that they know, hi, I'm your new director. You probably want to meet with all the senior people. In this group, in this company, it was 4 people, so obviously I could meet individually with them. But actually, I almost didn't. I almost thought that my team meeting was good enough. And then later, I thought, oh wait, I should meet one-on-one while I'm here in London. And boy, that's when the honest feedback came. On the team, no one wanted to say anything bad, but one-on-one, people were saying the stuff I really needed to know. Meet with your various customer groups. Figure out who the important people are. Figure out who the customer representatives are. So there were a whole bunch of salespeople, but one of them really was sort of the liaison to the IT team, and identifying that person was really important.
Big meetings, then smaller meetings, or
Yes.
other way around?
Big meetings, well, there's benefits to both. If you do the big meeting first, you might say something really stupid because you mentioned the third rail issue that you would have gotten a warning about if you did your individual meetings first. Yeah. Good point.
Well, that was a question, not a point.
I would do a couple individual meetings first, then everyone, and then as many people as you can. Finding out who's on your side and who isn't is really important. Find out, this can sort of, don't let someone poison your attitude. So if they say, oh, Bob's really evil, then your meeting and Bob is sort of tainted. But it's good to know, Bob always complains about the IT department. Maybe that's not a bad thing, but maybe that just means Bob's your canary in a coal mine, and you should pay attention to even more.
I always make Bob the first guy to try things out.
Oh,
Get
yeah.
him involved in the release process.
Right. One thing I wish I had done was stop any major rollouts until I understood the team's capacity and skills. So when I joined, they said, oh, thank God you're here, because we're about to roll out a new email server. And I said, oh, that sounds risky. They said, oh, we're ready. And I believed them. And I should have said, no, I'm sure you're ready, but we're going to wait a month, because we have some excuse other than I don't trust you yet. But yeah, that was just a disaster. We just had to roll back to the other email system. Get a good list of all current projects, curtail spending. Require others to get your sign off for expenditures. If people push back and say, oh, it's just the first couple months so I learn what's going on. But boy, will you learn a lot. find out who controls your budget, and act shocked and appalled at how small it is, no matter how big it is. That's really important. Like everyone who's in this position should have been like a theater minor in college. Because you have to do, no wonder you're having problems if you're spending that little. Well, we're gonna have a talk about that later. It's okay, later, we'll talk about it. Yeah. That's an investment.
I've only held 2 positions since college, and the 2 positions that I've had, the places where we worked, we didn't have a budget in advance. Everything we had to buy, we had to put a proposal together and sell it to management. And how can I get them to change their minds about that policy?
So CFOs like,
Ticket tracking system, every time you have to put time into getting the thing done, you time it, you think, this is how much time I'm wasting getting permission when I could be fixing the problem.
How about the historical, we spent last year this, 5,000 bucks in this, 10,000 in that, blah, blah, blah. Sure the numbers are the same every year.
Also, have a sit down with your CFO or whoever controls the budget and find out why they do this and are the things they like about it. So most CFOs I deal with say, what I hate is unexpected expenditures. Now, either your person likes unexpected expenditures, because maybe it gives them power. Say, oh, well, anytime you want to spend something, I want to make sure I've approved it. Maybe you could come up with a deal with, well, this means every time I talk to you, you're surprised that you need something. I'd rather write a budget, even if it's a fake budget, it's just my skeleton, and I still have to come to you for approval, but you understand this in the future. Also, is your environment like a large desktop environment or servers or?
Desktops.
Okay. So one thing you can do is you can say, well, I know you want me to come for approval on every little expenditure, but here's some numbers. Our desktops need to be replaced every 3 years. Here's the age of all of them, so I can tell you what your desktop budget, well, I'm going to come to you for purchase every month for the next 3 years, because I know, and I'm turning this into something predictable. And if you don't know the age, just get the year and say, well, each year we're going to replace 1/3 of our machines, and maybe break that down into a quarter. So that you're taking something that is chaotic and turning it into a regular periodic request. So it's not, oh, he's requesting more PCs. This is the January request, 5 machines. Oh, and see you next month. By the way, you should know it should be 6 machines based on the inventory.
The other thing is that, unless you're in a very special case, they already have some budget for IT. You're paying for things like IP addresses, internet access, other things like that. So somewhere there's an IT budget. It's just maybe something that isn't really in your scope of vision.
Yeah.
I would say I'm one of those special cases that doesn't do any of that. Well,
education?
It's a private company, but they're. What?
Oh, private company.
Yeah, private company. So
private small companies.
The guy who started the company approves all expenditures and doesn't feel you need a budget. Maybe tell him that, put together a fake budget and say this. Don't call it a budget though. Say this is my personal forecast, so I understand what projects I should be preparing for. We can talk more during the break. I just want to get through this. We only have a couple more minutes. So get a tour of the facilities, figure out what shape all your machine rooms are in. Do things look tidy and organized? If they're totally messy, that's a warning sign. Make sure there's at least one Brother P-Touch label maker. A lot of times, small wiring closets don't have any cooling because they're just for telecom equipment that has no active components. And then they move in the PBX and then a machine and another server, and now it's overheating. But it's fine because those all got moved in during the winter where the building's a little chilly anyway. And then spring comes and it's okay. Things get a little hot over the weekend and they survive until Monday and it's good. And they survive until the next Monday because the AC is off for the weekend. So they were leaching the building's cooling Monday through Friday and they just sort of survive over the weekend. And then Memorial Day weekend comes and that's a 3-day weekend. and they crash on Monday because they're too hot. So the first day in May, you should all go to every one of your computer closets and check the fan belts on the cooling system, or if there's no cooling system, make sure that there's no active equipment in the room, etc. I just
monitor temperature.
and monitor the temperature. Yeah.
Yeah, so check open manage will happily walk your sensors in your machines.
Yep. I had to remotely power down an office the other day. I was on call and the temperature sensor in a North Carolina building was too hot. Well, let's try shutting down the non-essential servers. Oh, look, the temperature stabilized. Call the office manager.
Also, they make temperature sensors for that time to a burglary or fire alarm panel. And that's another way to get information out about your thing overheating before your equipment fails or something like that. There's a central station will monitor that and call you.
Mm-hmm. So other things, analyze your team. Is everyone expected to know everything, or is there specialization? A lot of times when a team is small, it starts out everyone knows everything, and then you grow and grow and grow, and now you have a 20-person team where everyone tries to know everything, and that doesn't scale. So a good change to make is often introduce some specialization. Determine who the jerks are for eventual firing. I have no problem saying that. Every team works better. Nothing sabotages a great performing team worse than having the one person that's a total jerk. And if you are in a public company or business that can't fire people easily, that person can be just moved to special projects. If you can.
Any thoughts on people who are marginal jerks but essential at this point?
Then they should be trainable. Let them know that they're a jerk, and talk to HR. They probably have tech, suggestions, but you want to, in a compassionate way, explain to them that others, it's not their fault. Others are perceiving you as being unfriendly, and let's talk about some of the behaviors that I see. Talk in terms of behavior, not you're a jerk. Say, this behavior is often perceived as being unfriendly. Instead of saying, get out of my office, could you just say, I'm busy now, could we talk later? Yeah.
Over the last couple of months, I've been on the other end of coming to realize that apparently I'm somebody that that other people find irritating, and I never knew that until like 2 months ago.
Okay.
And
But
it's like, okay, now what do I
knowing
do
is
about
the
it?
first step to.
Yeah.
So these slides are pretty detailed. You all have the PDFs on your USB sticks. So I'm just going to go really quickly, but do some tests, open a ticket, and see how fast it takes to get resolved. Call your own help desk. We've talked a lot about documentation. And I'm going to end there because this is a good stopping point